Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Before you drift off, it would be a nice idea if you could leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from. Please don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. Right, let's get comfy and relaxed, and let's begin. Story 1, Whispers Through the Walls. Moving to the woods had always seemed like a romantic idea. I envisioned quiet mornings with coffee in hand, the sun breaking through the trees casting golden patches on the floor, and the sound of leaves rustling as a gentle breeze swept through. It was an escape from the bustling city, a chance to reclaim my sanity after the chaos of my life had threatened to swallow me whole. I had imagined it differently, though. Instead of tranquility, I found myself gripped by an unsettling paranoia. The first night, I sat on the porch with my back straight against the rickety chair, listening to the silence that felt almost deafening. I tried to convince myself it was merely the unfamiliarity of the surroundings. The way the shadows danced in the moonlight among the trees made me uneasy. My phone buzzed with a message from my best friend, asking how I liked my new home. I typed out a quick response, promising her I was settling in. But as I hit send, a scratching sound skittered across the wooden walls of the house. It was too rhythmic to be the wind. I stiffened, holding my breath. The scratching continued, a persistent scraping that seemed to move from one side of the house to the other. My heart raced as I tried to locate the source. I could have sworn it came from inside the walls. I told myself it was just the house settling, an old place creaking after years of neglect, yet the fear gnawed at my insides. That first week was a haze of unpacking and unbearable quiet. Each night, the scratching grew more insistent. Sometimes it sounded like fingernails dragging, other times like a clatter of tiny claws. I decided to ignore it, attributing the sounds to the wildlife I had read about in the area: squirrels, raccoons, perhaps even a fox. I tried to convince myself that this was normal for a secluded home, that I was simply adjusting to the solitude. But the unease clung to me like the damp chill of the evening air. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. On the third night, I noticed shadows flickering past the edges of my curtains. A tall, dark figure moved just beyond the glass, just out of sight. I blinked hard, convinced my imagination was running wild. When I peeked through the curtains, the yard was empty, only the swaying trees and swatches of moonlight breaking through their branches. The next day, I decided to confront my neighbor. The house next door had been abandoned for years, or so I thought. I'd never seen anyone coming or going, but when I wandered to the edge of my property, the thought crossed my mind that perhaps someone lived there. Perhaps I wasn't alone out here after all. I walked through the overgrown grass, thorns tugging at my jeans. The air felt heavier, more stagnant as I approached the dilapidated house, its windows like dark eyes staring back at me. I knocked on the door, each rap echoing through the stillness. After a moment, I heard the shuffling of footsteps inside, but they stopped abruptly. I knocked again, louder this time, and waited. Finally, the door creaked open just enough for a pair of weary eyes to peer out at me. The man who stood there looked as though he hadn't seen sunlight in days. His beard was a mass of unkempt hair, and the dark circles under his eyes spoke of sleepless nights. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. "I'm your neighbor," I said, forcing a smile. "I just moved in. I wanted to introduce myself and see if you needed anything." He nodded slowly, his gaze darting past me, as if searching for something. "I haven't been outside in days," he replied, his voice flat. "Not since the last storm." I frowned, confused. "Oh, right. Well, I just wanted to say hello. I've heard some strange noises at night, and I thought—" "What kind of noises?" he interrupted, his eyes narrowing. My throat tightened, feeling the weight of the scrutiny in his gaze. "Scratching. Sometimes it sounds like it's coming from inside the walls." He shifted uneasily, a flicker of something I couldn't name passing over his face. "Houses make noises," he said flatly. "Old houses, especially." I nodded, taking a step back, feeling unwelcome. "Right, just thought I'd mention it." He didn't respond, merely closed the door, the sound echoing in the stillness. As I walked away, a shiver coursed through me. I couldn't shake the feeling that our brief exchange held more darkness than light. The rest of the day passed in a blur, my mind haunted by the man's eyes and the shadows waiting for me back at home. That night, I lay in bed, the scratching sounds returning, more insistent than before. I pulled the blanket over my head, wishing it would block out the creeping sensation that something was very wrong. Thoughts of the neighbor swirled in my mind. Had he truly not been outside? Or had he been lurking in the shadows, watching me from the dark corners of my new world? Sleep evaded me. The scratching escalated, turning into a frantic scratching, a desperate clawing that gnawed at my sanity. I sat up, heart pounding, and stared at the darkened walls, waiting, listening. The shadows rippled across the walls like living things, taunting me, daring me to confront whatever lurked just beyond the thin barrier of my home. I felt it then, the undeniable reality that I had stepped into something far darker than I had anticipated, and the shadows had begun to creep closer. The sun dipped behind the pines, casting long, skeletal shadows across the yard. It was my second night in the secluded house, and unease settled into my bones like the chill in the air. I had anticipated the quiet solitude of the woods, but this felt different. The stillness crawled beneath the surface, alive in ways I could not yet articulate. I had spent the day unpacking, fingers brushing against the cool, worn surfaces of old furniture. Memories of where I had come from drifted away with each box I emptied. The promise of a fresh start shimmered faintly as the sun's last rays faded. But as dusk cloaked my surroundings, the air thickened, and I was reminded that isolation could breed a peculiar sort of paranoia. The first scratch had come just after midnight. It was faint at first, like the distant pattering of rain against the roof, which I ignored, chalking it up to the settling of the house. But then, as the hours wore on, the noise grew bolder. I lay in bed, heart racing, listening to the relentless scratching crawling along the walls, like something desperate trying to escape. Sleep evaded me, and instead, dread curled around my spine. When the second night arrived, I had resolved to confront my unease. I stood at the window, peering into the darkness beyond the glass. The woods were thick, shadows mingled with the whispers of the wind, swirling and twisting into shapes that seemed almost sentient. My gaze drifted to the neighboring house, a hulking structure barely visible between the trees. It loomed like an unanswered question, radiating a strange energy that pulsed beneath the surface. The day had passed without incident, but the air felt charged. I made my way to the door, my heart drumming in my chest like a warning. Stepping outside, the cool air washed over me, refreshing yet chilling. I tightened my coat around me, my breath clouding in the night. I had seen little of the neighbor since I moved in, an older man who barely acknowledged my presence when I first arrived. Perhaps it was time to introduce myself more formally. As I approached his house, the moon slid behind a thick blanket of clouds, casting the world into shadow. I knocked softly, the sound swallowed by the stillness. A moment passed, and I was ready to turn back when the door creaked open. He stood there, a silhouette against the dim light inside. "Hello," I said, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. "I'm your new neighbor. I wanted to see if we could introduce ourselves." He regarded me with narrowed eyes, his brow furrowing slightly. "I haven't been outside in days," he replied, his voice gravelly, as if the words had to claw their way out. "What do you want?" I hesitated, my mind racing. Should I tell him about the sounds? The shadows? Instead, I nodded, trying to maintain an air of friendliness. I just thought it might be nice to get to know each other. I live over there. I gestured back toward my house. He stepped back, as if my words had pushed him beyond his threshold of comfort. I'm busy, he mumbled and closed the door, the sound reverberating like a finality I couldn't ignore. I stood there, the hairs on my neck prickling as an icy breeze whispered through the trees. His peculiar response hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I turned back toward my house, uncertainty gnawing at my insides. Had my imagination conjured up the shadows, or was something truly lurking in the night? That evening, I tried to shake off the encounter, focusing instead on the mundane, cooking a simple dinner, organizing my things, distracting myself from the oppressive silence. The scratching returned, heavier this time, more insistent. It clotted me with every scrape, echoing through the walls as I sat at the kitchen table, clutching a fork, my appetite evaporating in the cold embrace of dread. I forced myself outside once more, pacing along the property line, the woods closing in around me like a trap. The moon peeked through the clouds, illuminating the path ahead, but the trees loomed like sentinels, oppressive and watchful. I stared into the darkness, half expecting to see a figure looming there, someone waiting just beyond the edge of sight. The scratching had grown into something more. It became rhythmic, almost purposeful, as if something was trying to communicate with me. Fear twisted in my gut, and I half convincingly told myself it was merely rodents seeking shelter. Yet the thought did little to quell the rising tide of anxiety. As the night deepened, I found myself sitting on the porch, the cool wood beneath me grounding my fraying nerves. A light flickered from the neighbor's house, the first hint of life I had witnessed since arriving. I squinted into the darkness, searching for even the slightest movement through the curtain. Moments stretched, the silence punctuated only by the rustle of leaves. Then, a shadow moved a flurry across the window. My heart raced, and I leaned forward, breath hitching in my throat. I was frozen in time, caught between curiosity and dread. The neighbor had said he hadn't been outside, but something told me that he was inside, restless and stirring. It was then that I heard it again, the scratching. It was closer now, not just on the walls but below me. A flicker of movement in the darkness forced me to look down. The ground seemed to shudder, as if something beneath was trying to claw its way to the surface. My heart pounded as I felt the very ground tremble beneath me, echoing the terror that had woven itself into every heartbeat. Suddenly, everything snapped into focus. The shadows of the trees seemed to creep closer, watching me, waiting. I stood, ready to retreat back inside, but the darkness felt hungry, beckoning me to linger, to uncover whatever secrets lay hidden just out of reach. I could no longer dismiss these occurrences as mere imagination. Something was amiss, and it was only a matter of time before I would confront the source of my terror. With every fiber of my being, I understood that the unseen neighbor was more than a recluse. He had become the embodiment of my fear, a figure lurking in the peripheries of my mind, feeding on my uncertainty. I was now alone in these woods, and whatever lived within the shadows had awakened. The air was thick with anticipation as I settled into my routine in the seclusion of my new home. The sun dipped below the horizon earlier each day, casting long shadows that crept across the forest floor. I often found myself drawn to the windows, watching the last light fade, wanting to believe that the darkness would bring peace. Instead, it only deepened my dread. The scratching sounds had begun to escalate. What started as a faint rustling had transformed into rhythmic, deliberate scraping, like fingernails trailing across wood. Each night, it seemed to grow closer, a sinister whisper woven into the fabric of the quiet woods. I told myself it was just the owls settling, old wood protesting against the chill. But as I lay awake, I could hear the scratching morph into something that felt almost deliberate, as though it were testing the limits of my sanity. One particularly restless night, I decided to confront this growing terror. I had noticed, during the day, that the neighbor's house was shrouded in shadows. I had seen glimpses of a tall figure moving behind the curtains, brief, fleeting glimpses that sent chills down my spine. Curiosity gnawed at me, and with it, an insatiable need for answers. I swore I would knock on his door, face whatever darkness lay within, and finally dispel my fears. Morning came with thick fog, the kind that seemed to wrap its fingers around my thoughts, drawing me deeper into contemplation. I gathered my resolve, dressed in layers against the chill, and set out for the neighbor's house. The path wound through trees that loomed like specters, their branches stretching out, reaching for me. Each step echoed unnaturally in the silence, amplified by the fog that cloaked the ground. As I approached his house, I felt the weight of its presence bearing down on me. The structure was dilapidated, more aged than I had initially thought. The paint peeled away from its walls, exposing the grain beneath it like dead skin. I could almost feel it breathe, the house exhaling a stale odor of neglect and decay. I stood at the door, hesitating, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was a simple wooden door, but it felt like a barrier to something far more sinister. I raised my hand, knocking softly. The sound echoed in the stillness, swallowed almost immediately by the heavy air. I waited, each second stretching into an eternity. Just as I was about to turn away, the door creaked open. There he stood, a tall man with unkempt hair and deep-set eyes that bore the weight of sleepless nights. His clothes hung loosely on him, almost as if he'd forgotten their purpose. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice a gravelly whisper that seemed to resonate with an otherworldly timbre. There was something unsettling about his gaze, something that made me want to retreat back into the forest. "I'm your neighbor," I stammered. "I've been hearing noises at night. Scratching sounds. I thought maybe you could." "I haven't been outside in days," he interrupted, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I keep to myself. The woods can play tricks on the mind." His response sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to probe further, to demand to know if he had seen anything unusual or if he was somehow involved in the disturbances that plagued my nights. Instead, I felt the weight of his presence pressing in on me, and a sense of urgency to escape the conversation overtook my curiosity. "I see," I replied, fumbling for a polite exit. "Thanks for your time." As I turned to leave, I glanced back, catching the briefest flicker of movement in the shadows behind him. A shadow that shouldn't belong to a man alone. My heart raced, and I hurried back down the path, the feeling of being watched burning into my back. That night, the scratching returned, louder and more insistent than ever, as if emboldened by my encounter with the neighbor. I pressed my palms against my ears, trying to drown out the sound, but it only intensified. It felt like something was trying to penetrate the walls, claw its way inside. My thoughts spiraled, drawing connections where there were none, forming a web of paranoia around me. Hours passed, and I lay frozen in bed, every creak of the house amplifying my fear. I wanted to believe it was simply my imagination, but a part of me felt the true weight of reality, the fact that I was utterly alone in this house, surrounded by an ocean of trees and an unseen threat. Then, just as I thought I could bear it no longer, I heard something different. A low, raspy whisper, emerging from the darkness, thin and sharp as a blade. The words were indecipherable, but it felt as though they were speaking directly to me. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone, illuminating the darkness around me. The light flickered momentarily, casting chaotic shadows that danced along the walls. I leaned against the headboard, my heart pounding as the whispering faded, replaced by the relentless scratching. Desperation clouded my mind. I needed to confront the neighbor once more, to demand answers that felt just out of reach. As first light broke through the trees, I resolved to confront him again, hoping that perhaps, just perhaps, he would finally understand the terror that had claimed me in this isolated nightmare. The woods had secrets, and I was determined to unveil them, even if it meant facing my fears head on. Little did I know, the true horror was just beginning to unfold. The wind howled outside my windows, a mournful wail that seemed to resonate with my own rising unease. After my encounter with Mr. Bendix, my reclusive neighbor, the shadows in my mind grew darker, spilling into reality with every passing night. The scratching had returned, more insistent than before, like a clawed creature trying to escape from the walls of my home. I had convinced myself it was merely the house settling, the old wood groaning like a tired beast. Yet, each night I lay in bed, the sound gnawed at my sanity. It started softly, a faint scratching that could have been the wind or an animal outside. However, as the hours crept forward, it grew louder, more deliberate, as if something was trying to communicate with me from within the very structure of the house. I spent the days trying to distract myself. I wandered through the woods, the trees looming like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky. I searched for signs of life, for anything to break the suffocating solitude. But the forest remained indifferent, its silence only amplifying the dread that had settled like a weight on my chest. As dusk fell, the scratching would begin again, and I became a prisoner within my own home. Each night, I could swear the sound shifted positions, moving from one wall to another as if a restless spirit roamed through the fibers of the house. I tried to document it, but the writing felt futile, a desperate attempt to make sense of the chaos swirling around me. I had not seen Mr. Bendix since our brief conversation. For all I knew, he could have been lying in wait, lurking just beyond my perception. I had considered confronting him again, but paranoia nipped at my heels. What if he was telling the truth? What if he hadn't left his house at all? One evening, a particularly loud scratch jolted me from a fitful sleep. I bolted upright, my heart pounding in a frantic rhythm. I turned on the lamp beside my bed, its light flickering weakly. Shadows danced along the walls, their movements appearing almost sentient. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of dread clouding my thoughts. I had to know. I needed answers. Throwing on a jacket, I stepped outside, the chill of the night wrapping around me like a shroud. The moon hung high, casting an eerie glow over the path to Mr. Bendix's house. I hesitated at the threshold, the darkness curling around me like fingers. But resolve outweighed fear, and I pressed forward. As I approached his home, the atmosphere thickened, the air heavy with an unsettling quiet. The house stood there, its windows dark and vacant, much like the man who inhabited it. I raised my hand to knock, but the realization struck me that I would be interrupting someone who claimed not to have been outside in days. A sudden rustling in the underbrush made me jump, and I turned sharply. I scanned the yard for any sign of movement, but it was only the branches swaying in the wind, whispering secrets I was too frightened to comprehend. Gathering my courage, I rapped my knuckles against the door. Moments stretched into eternity before I heard the shuffle of footsteps from inside. The door creaked open, revealing Mr. Bendix, his eyes wide and weary, as if he had just awakened from a deep slumber. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly. "Mr. Bendix," I hesitated, wrestling with the words that fought to spill from my lips. "I've been hearing strange sounds at night. Scratching, like something is trying to get in." He blinked slowly, his expression inscrutable. "I can assure you, it's nothing to be concerned about. Sometimes these old houses play tricks on the mind. But it's not just me. I feel like there's something out there. Or in here." I gestured toward my house, my voice quaking. "You said you've been inside, but..." "I haven't been outside in days," he interrupted sharply, his gaze penetrating. "You don't know what's out there. It's not safe." The air thickened with tension, each word hanging between us like a suspended blade. "What do you mean?" He took a step back, the door swinging wider. I caught a glimpse of a darkened room behind him, something shifting in the shadows. You should go back. Trust me, it's better if you don't dig deeper. Better for who? I pressed, adrenaline coursing through my veins. You're hiding something. I'm trying to protect you, he said, and despite his words, I could see a flicker of something in his eyes, fear, perhaps, or desperation. Before I could respond, a loud crash echoed from within the house. My heart raced as I turned toward the sound, and when I looked back, Mr. Bendix had vanished into the darkness of his home, leaving me alone on his doorstep. Mr. Bendix? I called, but there was only silence. An icy dread settled in my stomach as I realized I was left standing in the void between two houses, both harboring secrets that could consume me whole. I turned to leave but froze, a feeling of being watched prickling my skin like icy fingers. Shadows flickered at the corners of my vision, mingling with the trees, haunting me with every rustle and groan of the night. I was now alone, and I sensed the creeping dread that something unseen lingered nearby, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. With each step back towards my home, I felt the weight of unseen eyes upon me, and the scratching resumed in the distance, an echo of my own racing heart. I was no longer simply a woman in a secluded house. I was a target, trapped in a game I didn't understand. And the rules were terrifyingly uncertain. The biting cold of early autumn seeped through the thin walls of my house, and each night seemed longer than the last. I had hoped that settling in the woods would bring me peace, but instead, I felt like a moth fluttering against a window, trapped in a cycle of panic and uncertainty. The scratching sounds had escalated, transforming from quiet scuffles to a relentless assault on my sanity. I had tried to ignore them, attributing the noises to the settling of the old house or perhaps some nocturnal creature lurking just outside my walls. But deep down, I knew the truth was far more unsettling. It was around 3 o'clock in the morning when I awoke, the air thick with a strange tension. The scratching had begun again, low and persistent, sending icy tendrils of fear down my spine. I lay still, my heart racing, willing myself to listen closely. The sounds were coming from the northern wall, the one that bordered my neighbor's property. I had only met him once, a brief encounter that left me feeling uneasy, and now I couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow tied to the horror unfolding in my home. After days of restless nights, fatigue gnawed at me like a hunger. I decided I could no longer endure the torment alone. The following day, I wrapped myself in a thick coat and steeled my nerves, determined to confront my neighbor. I needed answers, even if they came wrapped in more questions. As I trudged through the overgrown path leading to his house, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced in the wind. His cabin was shrouded in gloom, the windows dark and lifeless. I knocked on the door, the sound echoing into the silence around me. Moments stretched dreadfully, and just when I thought he wouldn't answer, the door creaked open. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gruff and thick, as though he hadn't spoken to anyone in days. "I'm your neighbor," I stammered, suddenly feeling small under his scrutinizing gaze. "I've been hearing some strange noises at night. Scratching, like something's trying to get in." He paused, his expression unreadable, and then shrugged. "Could be anything. Animals get in everywhere." I pressed on, desperate for clarity. "But it's not just that. I've seen shadows moving by my windows. I thought maybe it was you, but you haven't been outside in days, have you?" He shifted uncomfortably, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting something or someone to emerge from the woods. "I don't go out much." "Hardly ever," he replied, his voice losing its composure. "Then why?" I started, but he cut me off. "Just leave it be. You don't want to know," he warned, his tone darkening. A shiver ran down my spine. There was something he wasn't telling me, something lurking behind his words. I backed away from him, my instinct screaming at me to leave. The conversation had left me more unsettled than before. yet I couldn't shake the feeling that my suspicions were right. I turned on my heel and hurried back to my house, the air thick with foreboding. That night, I locked the doors and turned off all the lights, hoping the darkness would somehow shield me from whatever was tormenting me. But the scratching sounds returned, louder and more insistent than ever. It was as if whatever was outside was growing bolder, emboldened by my fear. My heart pounded so loudly I feared it would burst from my chest. I sat in the living room, shivering in the cold as I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. The shadows in the corners seemed to elongate and twist, morphing into grotesque shapes that danced to a rhythm only they could hear. I pushed my back against the couch, trying to become one with its cushions, trying to drown out the sounds reverberating around me. And then I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, soft yet deliberate, moving along the edge of my house. I held my breath, every instinct telling me to reach for my phone, to call for help, but I was frozen in place, gripped by terror. The footsteps paused, and I could almost feel a presence outside, lingering, waiting. Suddenly, there was a loud bang against the wall, right where the scratching had been, as if something had slammed against it. I screamed, the sound tearing through the silence of the night. In a panic, I scrambled to my feet and dashed for the front door, my heart racing as I flung it open and stepped outside into the frigid air. The moon cast a pale glow over the woods, illuminating my neighbor's house just beyond the trees. I felt like an intruder on my own property, but I had to know what was happening. I stumbled down the path, fueled by desperation and fear. As I neared his cabin, I saw a shadow flit past the window, and my heart seized. I knocked frantically, the wood vibrating under my fists. "Let me in," I shouted, my voice cracking. "I need your help." For a moment, there was only silence, and I could feel the suffocating pressure of the woods closing in around me. Then I heard movement inside, a shuffling and a grunt, and finally, the door creaked open. "What do you want?" he snapped, irritation flaring in his eyes. "Please," I gasped. "I think something is out there. I can't stay in my house." He hesitated, and in that moment, I saw something shift in his demeanor. A flicker of understanding, perhaps recognition of the primal fear that had gripped me. He stepped aside and gestured for me to enter. "You better come in then." I stumbled past him, the air inside thick and heavy. As he closed the door behind us, I felt the weight of something unnameable pressing down on me, a terror that whispered in the silence, and I knew that the worst was still to come. Story 2, Stalker in the Shadows. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow in the nearly empty convenience store. It was just past midnight, and the silence pressed in around me like a thick fog. I leaned against the counter, absently tapping my fingers on the register while I scanned the darkened aisles. Was it always this quiet on a Wednesday night? I couldn't remember. My shift had begun at 10. The store was never busy at this hour, but tonight felt different. The door chime jingled as I leaned closer to the screen, scrolling through the dull routine of inventory checks. A slight rustle from outside made me look up. I spotted a figure lingering in the parking lot, half obscured in the shadows. My heart quickened. I peered closer but couldn't make out any details. Just another customer, I told myself, even as a strange unease settled in my stomach. I turned back to the register just as the phone rang, a harsh ringing that echoed through the store. I hesitated, then picked up the receiver. "Convenience Corner, how can I help you?" "Hello, Jessica," said a smooth voice. It was calm but sent chills down my spine. "I'm right outside." I glanced towards the windows, my pulse racing. "Who is this?" I managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just a friend," he replied, his tone playful, almost taunting. I can see you. You're alone. What do you think of that? My heart hammered. Stop messing around, I said, hoping my voice didn't betray my anxiety. This isn't funny. Not funny? Come on, Jess. You've got to admit, it's a little exciting, he said. I could almost hear the smile on his face. I slammed the receiver down and took a shaky breath. I glanced at the parking lot again but saw nothing out of the ordinary. No one was there. I tried to shake off the conversation, telling myself it was just a prank. But the calmness of his voice clung to me like a damp fog. The next hour dragged on, each tick of the clock amplifying the silence. I busied myself with tidying up, shifting my focus away from the unsettling call. I arranged candy bars, wiped down the counter, and even checked the stock in the back. The old, buzzing neon sign flickered sporadically, casting strange shadows that danced in the corners of my periphery. Then the phone rang again. I stared at it for a moment, debating whether to answer. I finally picked up, heart racing. Hello? It's me again, he said. I see you've been busy. You must be lonely. Leave me alone. I shouted, slamming the receiver down once more. I took a deep breath to steady my trembling hands but only felt spiraling panic. I moved to the windows, peering into the parking lot. Still empty. I had worked night shifts before, but this felt different. It wasn't just the calls. It was the constant feeling that someone was watching me, lurking just out of sight. I turned around and locked the door, even though I knew it wouldn't stop someone who really wanted to get in. The clock ticked on, each minute stretching into an eternity. I flipped through the radio channels, searching for a familiar voice to drown out my thoughts. I settled on a talk show, but the cheerful banter felt jarring against my growing dread. The lights flickered again. I winced, glancing around the store. When my eyes returned to the front window, I saw him. He stood in the parking lot, illuminated by the dim glow of the street lamp. A tall figure, dressed in dark clothing, completely still and facing the store. My heart sank. I couldn't make out his features, but I could feel his gaze piercing through the glass, locking onto me. I grabbed the phone again, my hands shaking. I didn't want to call the police. What would I say? I decided instead to call my friend, Tara. She would understand. As the dial tone rang, I prayed she would answer. Come on, pick up, I muttered under my breath. 1 ring. 2. 3. But just as the 4th ring began, the voice slithered back through the line. Why don't you just let me in, Jess? It's so cold out here. My breath caught in my throat. What do you want? I whispered, panic swelling in my chest. You, he said softly. I want you to come outside. I slammed the phone down, my heart racing. I wasn't going out there. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. I turned off the radio, the silence now deafening, and stepped back from the counter. My eyes never left the window. He hadn't moved, still standing there, and I felt frozen in place, rooted by fear. Minutes passed, and dawn was still far away. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was just waiting, enjoying my terror. I decided to call Tara again, but my resolve crumbled as the phone slipped from my fingers and fell to the floor. With a shaky breath, I grabbed a heavy flashlight from behind the counter, feeling foolish but desperate. I knew I had to check the back. I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't trapped in some horror movie. I forced my feet to move, edging towards the back room, the beam of the flashlight trembling in my hands. As I stepped into the darkness, the shadows seemed to stretch ominously around me. The air felt thick, and I heard a faint noise, something scuttling across the floor. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. I aimed the flashlight towards the sound, and all I could see were the shelves of stock. Then, from somewhere behind me, a soft voice whispered, "Don't be scared, Jessica. I'm right here." The darkness swallowed me whole. I took a step back, the flashlight beam shaking wildly as I turned to confront the voice. The pulse in my neck throbbed painfully as I realized I had no idea what awaited me in the shadows. The fluorescent lights flickered again, casting a sickly pallor over the aisles adorned with snack foods and overpriced sodas. It was an all too familiar scene, yet tonight felt different. I could almost taste the unease that clung to the air, thick and suffocating. I had only been on the night shift for a couple of weeks, but each shift had dripped by like molasses. The clock on the wall, with its relentless ticking, mocked me as the minutes slouched onward. I was alternating my attention between the screen of my phone and the endless arrangement of sodas when the landline rang. My heart lurched, a response so instinctive I almost didn't want to answer it. I set my phone down slowly, my fingers trembling slightly as I reached for the receiver. "Good evening, Shady Grove Convenience," I greeted, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Hello there," the voice replied, smooth and dark, a stark contrast to my own shaky tone. "How's it feel to be all alone in the dead of night?" My gut twisted. "Who is this?" I asked, attempting to sound assertive, but my bravado faltered under the weight of his words. "Just a friend," he responded, and I could almost hear the smirk on his lips. "I'm parked outside, you know." I glanced toward the large glass windows that framed the entrance. The parking lot was empty, illuminated by the dim overhead lights. A shiver danced down my spine. Is this some kind of prank? Not at all. I just wanted to keep you company on your lonely shift. He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Do you feel safe?" I swallowed hard, feeling the bile rise in my throat. "Why are you doing this?" "Oh, you'll find that out soon enough," he said. With that, the line went dead. I stared at the receiver, my breath coming in short gasps. I took a moment to steady myself, trying to shake off the dread that clung to me like a second skin. I left the phone off the hook, half suspecting that the man would call back. Instead, I slipped my phone from my pocket and began scrolling through social media, a futile attempt at distraction. But my eyes kept darting back to the windows, the faint shadows swaying just beyond the glass. Time dragged on, every tick of the clock amplifying the tension in the air. At 2 a.m, the phone rang again. My heart raced as I answered, already knowing who it would be. "Hello, sweetheart," he crooned, as if we were old friends. "Still working that lonely night shift?" "Leave me alone," I hissed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why?" "I'm just outside, watching," he said, a sickening glee lacing his tone. "You should be careful. You never know who may be lurking in the darkness." I slammed the receiver down, my mind racing. A sense of powerlessness enveloped me, and I felt trapped in a living nightmare. I glanced at the exit, my heart pounding at the thought of running outside. But what if he was out there, waiting for me? I took a few deep breaths, trying to quell the panic rising within me. Forcing myself to focus, I moved to the back of the store, where the faint hum of the freezer units provided a semblance of normalcy. As I stocked shelves, each creak and groan of the building sounded like a whisper, taunting me, reminding me of the phone calls. It was nearly 3 when I heard it again. A soft thump came from the front of the store, like something heavy had fallen outside. My heart raced, and I crept to the front, my feet moving soundlessly on the tiled floor. Standing just behind the counter, I peeked through the window. The parking lot was now cloaked in shadows, the streetlights flickering ominously. I strained to see beyond the haze of darkness, wondering if I might catch a glimpse of him. But all I could see were vague shapes, indistinguishable from the night. My mind played tricks on me as the shadows seemed to shift and swirl, each one morphing into a potential threat. I could feel him, lurking just beyond my sight. The urge to throw open the door and confront whatever was out there gripped me, but fear rooted me in place. A second thump echoed, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I whipped around, expecting to find someone behind me. But the store was empty. I gripped the counter, willing myself to regain some composure. I reminded myself it was just a convenience store, just a job. But the phone rang once more, and the dread returned like a tidal wave. "Hello, it's me again," he said, voice almost playful. "I think you're beautiful when you're scared." "Stop it," I shouted. "What do you want from me?" "I just want to watch you," he replied, the words sliding off his tongue like syrup. "The way you jump at shadows, it's delightful." I dropped the receiver, my breath hitching as I felt the walls closing in. I could almost hear his laughter through the line, creeping into my thoughts. I stumbled backward, bumping into a display of chips and sending them tumbling to the floor with a loud crash. The sound seemed to reverberate through the emptiness, and for a moment I stood frozen, every sense heightened. I wanted to rush outside, run to my car, and escape this place. But the thought of him watching me made it impossible to move. Then I heard it. A faint scraping sound by the front door. Panic seized me, and I darted behind the counter, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would burst. I peered around the edge, breath held tight. The door creaked open, and I clutched my phone tightly, ready to call for help if I had to. But the figure that stepped inside was nothing but a dark silhouette, barely illuminated by the flickering lights. "Hello? Is anyone here?" a voice called, distorted and distant. I took a shaky breath, trying to steady my pulse. It wasn't him. Yet the tension remained, suspended in the air like a noose. I hesitated, wondering if I should reveal myself or stay hidden. "Hello?" the voice repeated, sounding closer now. I forced myself to step into the light, my heart pounding against my ribs. As I emerged from the shadows, I was met not by the man from the phone, but by a weary customer, a faded baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. "Sorry to startle you," he said, his voice gravelly. "I just need some smokes." "You got any?" Yeah. Right over here," I stammered, relief flooding my senses, but it was short-lived. I knew the night was far from over, and the shadows outside still held their secrets. The fluorescent lights above flickered, casting unsettling shadows across the aisles, as if the convenience store itself were breathing. With each hum of the vending machine, I felt the weight of the night pressing down, wrapping around me like a heavy shroud. There was only so much coffee I could drink, and I had already hit my limit. The clock's hands crawled toward the witching hour, the world outside slowly darkening under the weight of the night sky. The phone rang again. It was the same number, flashing ominously on the screen. I hesitated but then picked it up, my heart pounding like a drum. "Hello?" "Hi there," the voice on the other end whispered, smooth yet dripping with something sinister. "I'm still out here." Cold dread seeped into my bones. "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Just a friend," he replied, a chuckle tinged with malice. "Watching you, from the parking lot. You should really look outside." I hung up, my hands trembling. My eyes darted to the front windows, but all I could see was the black expanse of night. Nothing but shadows stretched across the pavement, the faint glow of the nearby streetlight casting a weak halo on the surrounding darkness. Still, unease settled in the pit of my stomach, coiling tighter with each passing moment. The phone rang again, but this time, I left it to ring. I couldn't afford to let him invade my thoughts, yet I found myself glancing outside every few seconds, searching for any hint of movement, any shadow that didn't belong. The wind picked up, rustling the scattered leaves like whispers, and I could have sworn I heard the crunch of gravel underfoot. There was a tiny part of me that wanted to laugh it off, to convince myself that it was just a prank, some bored teenager looking for a thrill. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, lurking just beyond my line of sight. I pulled my phone from my pocket and texted my friend, Sarah, hoping she'd respond quickly. Working late. Got a weird call from someone claiming to be watching me. Not funny. I tucked the phone away, glancing at the security monitor. The camera showed the empty parking lot, a savage void under the dim streetlights. Everything looked normal, but the longer I stared, the more I felt that something was off, as if the darkness itself was alive, watching me back. The clatter of a cart made me jump. I spun around, finding an old man shuffling down the aisle, his face shadowed by the brim of a faded baseball cap. He glanced at me, and for a moment, I saw an emptiness in his gaze that sent chills down my spine. "You got any more of that chocolate milk?" he croaked, his voice raspy. Yes, let me get that for you," I replied, forcing a smile that felt too wide. I turned my back to him, my heart still racing. As I reached for the carton, I couldn't shake the feeling that the old man wasn't just a customer. When I turned back, he was gone. I glanced toward the door, unease washing over me again. "Sir?" I called out, but the silence that followed was deafening. The door swung slightly, as if someone had just exited, but I hadn't heard the bell chime. I struggled to breathe, the air thick with a sense of foreboding. I returned to the cash register, my fingers trembling as I rang up the dwindling inventory. The store felt more claustrophobic than ever, the walls closing in, shadows shifting in the corners of my vision. I was alone with my thoughts, and they twisted and turned, combing through every possible scenario until I felt trapped in my own mind. Then my phone vibrated. Sarah's reply came through. "Call the cops if you feel unsafe. I'll be at work in the morning. Just hang in there." The thought of calling the police lingered. But what would I tell them? That a voice on the phone claimed to be watching me? I could already hear the disbelief in the officer's voice. The phone rang again. I picked it up cautiously, my heart racing. "What do you want?" I shot back, desperate to reclaim some semblance of control. "Just checking in on you," the voice purred, his tone mockingly sweet. "You should really look outside. I can see you." My pulse quickened. This was getting out of hand. I glanced at the monitor again, my breath hitching as I observed what looked like a figure moving near the far corner of the lot. My instinct screamed at me to run, to lock the front door, but fear had me frozen in place, unwilling to take my eyes off the shadowy shape. "Do you see me?" he asked, the laughter in his voice echoing through the receiver. I could hear the amusement, could sense the thrill he took in my growing terror. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed the phone down and bolted for the front door, locking it with shaking fingers. The sound of the bolt sliding into place was a small comfort, but as I turned back to the windows, I realized I was staring directly into a pair of eyes, dark, unblinking, and piercing. He stood just outside the reach of the light, his silhouette backlit by the glow behind him. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor, terror clawing at my throat. The air thickened with his presence, and as he stepped closer, I caught a glimmer of something shiny in his hand. I wasn't alone anymore. The night stretched before me like an abyss, and I was standing on the edge. The fluorescent lights buzzed above me, casting a sterile glow over the aisles of the convenience store. I had wiped down the same shelf for the third time, trying to stave off the creeping dread that settled in my chest like a stone. The clock blinked a soft 3:37 a.m., and the only sound was the rhythmic tick of time hanging heavily in the air. I should have felt relieved that the early morning hours were almost upon me, but a gnawing anxiety clung to me more closely than my uniform. It was then that the phone rang again, the shrill sound slicing through the quiet. I hesitated, glancing warily toward the register. It felt absurd to be afraid of the phone, yet the last time I had answered it, the voice had sent a shiver down my spine. I steeled my resolve, picking up the receiver with a trembling hand. "Hello?" My voice was shaky, barely above a whisper. "Do you see me?" The voice was low and gravelly, its tone playful yet menacing. "I'm right outside." My heart raced, and for a moment, I almost hung up. "Who is this?" I managed to croak out, my throat dry. "Just a friend. Watching you watch the time pass by. You look lonely in there." Panic surged through my veins, and I shot a glance at the darkened parking lot visible through the store's front windows. The area was deserted, illuminated only by the flickering streetlight that cast long, eerie shadows. I tried to laugh, to brush off the absurdity of the situation, but the sound came out hollow and strained. "You're joking, right?" I managed, forcing a bravado I didn't feel. "This isn't funny." "Funny?" I thought it was sad. So quiet. So alone. He chuckled softly, the sound chilling me to the core. "Don't worry. I'm not here to hurt you. Just to watch." "What do you want?" I snapped, though my voice trembled, betraying my fear. "I just want you to know that I'm closer than you think." The line went dead. I dropped the receiver, feeling it slip through my fingers and crash into the plastic dashboard. My breath came in short, erratic bursts as I tried to ground myself, reminding myself that I was in a store, surrounded by candy bars and soda bottles. But the weight of his words pressed down on me. I crept over to the front window, peering into the darkness. My heart raced. I scanned the parking lot, searching for movement, for any sign of the man who haunted my thoughts. The streetlight flickered again, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing beside a car, the outline indistinct but menacing. I squinted, but when I blinked, the figure was gone. "Get a grip, Sarah," I whispered to myself, stepping back. I busied myself restocking the chips while keeping my eyes glued to the door, half expecting it to burst open at any moment. Every time the wind rattled the outer sign or a stray cat scuttled past, I flinched. The store, once a safe haven of routine, had morphed into a prison of shadows and paranoia. Minutes felt like hours. Each time the phone rang, I recoiled in terror, heart pounding in my ears. I let it ring twice, only to pick it up again, dread coursing through me. My mind raced with endless possibilities of what awaited on the other end, but curiosity overpowered fear. "Hello?" I tried to sound steady, though my voice quaked. "Did you check the parking lot?" he asked, his voice low and conspiratorial. "I'm still here." "I'm calling the police," I said, though I knew it was a feeble threat. I could feel the sweat forming in my temples, the tension in my throat tightening like a noose. "No need for that. Just humor me. Look outside and let me know what you see." The urgency of his command sent icy fingers creeping along my spine. I didn't want to check. I didn't want to look, but I forced my legs to move. Each step felt like wading through molasses, the air heavy with dread as I approached the front window. I peered through the glass, half expecting to see him waiting right there, a twisted grin spread across his face. But the parking lot was empty, save for a few scattered shopping carts and the shadows they cast in the intermittent light. I breathed out, but the relief was short-lived. The silence loomed, thick and suffocating. "Nothing," I said weakly, retreating from the window. "You're not here. Are you sure about that?" His voice was no longer playful but dark, dripping with malice. "What if I told you I was just behind you?" The blood in my veins turned to ice. I whipped around, terror paralyzing me as I scanned the store's interior. Nothing seemed out of place, but the feeling of being watched pervaded the air. My breath quickened, and I fumbled for my phone, my fingers shaking as I searched for the number to call for help. Why do you want to scare me? What do you want from me? I shouted into the receiver, my voice cracking. The line fell silent, and in that quiet, the world outside seemed to pause. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the distant murmur of traffic. But that was it, and in that stillness, I felt the weight of his gaze, heavy and unyielding. Just wanted to ensure you don't feel so lonely, he replied, voice now a whisper. It's only a few hours until dawn. I'll be here until then. Why are you doing this? I asked, desperation washing over me. I glanced toward the exit, imagining him waiting just outside, ready to pounce the moment I stopped paying attention. Because I can, he whispered again, sending fresh terror coursing through me. No one knows you're out here alone. No one's coming for you. You're all mine until morning. Every noise outside, each rustle of leaves, the sway of shadows became magnified, paralyzing me with fear. I was trapped in a waking nightmare, a pawn in a twisted game I didn't understand. I had to survive till dawn. But with every passing moment, I felt the grip of madness tightening, the shadows swirling around me like phantoms ready to drag me into darkness. The only thing I knew for sure was that the night was far from over. The flickering neon sign outside cast an eerie glow through the store windows, illuminating the aisles with a sickly hue. The hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, an incessant reminder of my solitude in this desolate convenience store. It was just past 2 in the morning, and as I leaned against the counter, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I had spent the last few hours restocking shelves and reorganizing the candy display, trying to occupy my mind with mundane tasks. The quiet had settled around me like a thick fog, wrapping me in an oppressive silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling. On nights like these, a mere sound could become a source of dread, and I had learned to listen closely. My phone buzzed, jarring me from my thoughts. I glanced down and recognized the number. It was the same one that had called before, the man who had claimed he was watching me. I debated answering, but the adrenaline coursing through me made the decision easy. With a deep breath, I pressed the green button. Hello? My voice trembled slightly, betraying my bravado. Are you scared? His voice was low but clear, a whisper that seemed to curl around my spine. No, I managed to reply, though I could feel the chill of his words seep into my bones. I see you, he said, the sound mocking, almost playful. You're alone, aren't you? Just you and me. I glanced out the front window, squinting into the darkness. The parking lot stretched into shadows, every car an ominous silhouette. What do you want? I asked, my voice steadier now, fueled by irritation more than fear. Just to watch, he answered, and the call went dead. I dropped the phone onto the counter, my heart racing. His words replayed in my mind, taunting me. I scanned the store, feeling the weight of every product on the shelves, as if they were my only companions in this nightmare. Forcing myself to focus on the time, I noticed that an hour had slipped away. The clock ticked forward, each second marked by the pounding of my heart. I returned to the ice cream freezer, mechanically arranging items as I fought the rising tide of panic. I was alone, but I could not shake the feeling of presence lurking just outside. Another noise, a slight scrape against the window, made me jump. I turned quickly, my breath hitching in my throat. The parking lot was empty. I cursed under my breath, disgusted with myself for reacting like this, but the tension sat heavy on my chest. The phone rang again, and this time I hesitated. The twisted thrill of fear twisted my gut. What if it was him again? Swallowing hard, I picked up, my fingers trembling. Hello? Hello, darling. That's soft, seductive voice slithered through the receiver. "You have no idea how beautiful you look in that little store, all alone. Leave me alone." I shouted, but my voice cracked, betraying the fear pooling in my stomach. "Why?" "I just want to talk," he said, his tone deceptively calm. "You're so far away from anyone. Alone. It's just us." My mind raced. I couldn't let him know how much his words affected me. "You think you're scary? You're just a coward hiding in the dark." He chuckled, the sound gravelly and low. "But you're the one who's scared, aren't you? You're afraid of what's outside. How many shadows have you looked into?" I glanced outside again, the shadows twisting and writhing under the streetlights. "You're just some sick pervert. What do you want?" His laughter echoed in my ear before he simply hung up. I dropped the phone, my hands shaking. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but I remained frozen, trapped in a standoff with my panic. Then I heard a soft thud against the back door. My heart leapt into my throat, and I held my breath as silence enveloped the store again. Was it him? My mind raced through every horror movie I had ever seen, every cautionary tale of the bad guy lurking just outside. I edged toward the back of the store, forcing myself to move. The fluorescent lights above began to flicker, casting shadows that danced along the walls. Each step felt like walking on glass, the fear of what I might find paralyzing me. I reached the door and pressed my ear against the cold metal. Nothing. Just silence. My heart pounded loudly in my ears as I considered my options. I could call the police, but what could I tell them? A man had been watching me? It sounded insane, even to myself. Then another thud, more insistent this time, followed by a slow dragging sound. I jumped back, my pulse thrumming wildly. Panic surged, and I turned to run back to the front of the store. I couldn't be trapped like this, not tonight. As I raced back to the counter, the lights flickered again and then went out completely, plunging the store into darkness. I gasped, fumbling for my phone, my only source of light. When I finally found it, I clicked on the flashlight and held it up, the beam cutting through the thick blackness. "Just breathe," I whispered to myself, but the tremor in my voice betrayed the calm I tried to project. My eyes darted around, searching for movement in the shadows. The back door rattled, a faint groan reverberating through the thin walls. He was out there, and I could feel it. The only thing separating us was a flimsy piece of wood. I backed up against the counter, prepared to defend myself. I wished for the store's security system to activate, for the comfort of knowing someone else was aware of my plight. But no one was coming. I was utterly alone. With every sound outside, every scrape or thud, the walls of the store seemed to close in around me. I needed to think clearly. I was trained for this. The store had emergency protocols, but all I could focus on was the growing dread that wrapped around me, squeezing tighter with each passing moment. As I heard a final thud, equal parts defiant and foreboding, I raised my phone higher, heart racing. The night was still young, and dawn felt as far away as ever. A figure loomed just outside the glass, backlit by the streetlight, and I felt the air leave my lungs. He was waiting, watching, and now the game began. Story 3, Shadowed Steps. Every evening, just as the sun tipped below the horizon, I laced up my running shoes, the familiar ritual grounding me. The pavement glistened with the remnants of the day, and the air grew crisp against my skin. I savored these moments of solitude, my thoughts a gentle hum. Running had been my escape, a way to shake the frustrations of the day as I sped down familiar streets, surrounded by the quiet of my neighborhood. But one night, as I rounded the corner by the park, I noticed a van parked along the curb, a rusty, nondescript thing that could have belonged to anyone. At first, I thought nothing of it. Urban life had its quirks, after all. I barely glanced at it, focusing instead on the rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement. The next evening, the van was there again. I shivered, a chill creeping down my spine. I picked up my pace, the comforting sounds of the city drowning out any strange thoughts. But the sight of that van nagged at me, lurking in the back of my mind. It was just a vehicle, I told myself, a figment of paranoia. But when I glanced back, its sliding door gaped open like a waiting mouth, empty and inviting. The following night, it was parked in the same spot once more. This time, headlights flickered on as I approached, illuminating the night for a brief moment before retreating into darkness. My heart raced as I ran past. There was something about the way it loomed that sent a shiver through me. I knew it was silly, a van wasn't capable of malice. It was just metal and glass. Still, I felt a prickling awareness, a sense that I was being watched. I didn't say anything to my friends. They would dismiss it, tell me to calm down, to stop being dramatic. Yet, as the week progressed, I couldn't shake the sensation. Each time I passed the van, I felt its presence more acutely, like a shadow trailing me. I tried to focus on the rhythm of my breath, counting my strides, but my mind wandered back to that vehicle. On the sixth night, I spotted him for the first time, a figure leaning casually against the van, obscured in darkness. He wore a hood, but even the faint light from the street lamp illuminated the glint of his eyes, watching me as I ran. The breath caught in my throat, panic rising to my chest. I quickened my pace, my heart racing. The sensation of being hunted enveloped me. I shifted my route the next evening. It was a calculated risk. The new path looped around the neighborhood instead of the park. As I ran, I felt an illusion of safety, the rhythm of my feet drowning out the thoughts that had plagued me. But when I rounded a bend, my heart seemed to drop into my stomach. There he was, standing next to a different van, parked at the entrance of the cul-de-sac. The same hood obscured his face, but the unmistakable watchfulness was there, chilling me to the bone. I turned on my heel, my pulse pounding in my ears. My breath came in ragged gasps as I sprinted back the way I had come. I needed to be home, wrapped in the cocoon of familiarity and safety. I raced through the streets, now warped and foreign, as shadows stretched around me. Arriving at my front door, I fumbled for my keys, nearly dropping them as I shoved the key into the lock. I burst inside, slamming the door behind me and locking it tightly, the bolt sliding home with a satisfying click. I sank against the door, pressed my back against the wood, and listened to the silence of my small apartment. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, the sheets clammy against my skin. My mind replayed the images of the figure, the van, the eyes that had tracked my every move. I could hardly breathe, suffocated by dread. I kept hoping it was all just a figment of my imagination, that tomorrow would bring clarity. But deep down, I knew better. As dawn broke the next morning, washing my walls in pale light, I vowed to take a break from running. The streets felt tainted, the fear still too fresh. I planned to hit the gym instead, where the clamor of dumbbells and chatter would drown out my anxiety. I could live with that. But despite my efforts, each day stretched long and heavy, the walls of my apartment closing in around me. The absence of my daily ritual weighed on me, feeding a different kind of dread. My mind wouldn't relent. It was that van, that figure, those eyes that watched me. They were an itch I couldn't scratch, a dark presence hovering just out of reach. On the third day of my hiatus, I decided to take a walk to clear my head. The air was mild, and it felt good to be outside, even if I stayed close to home. I strolled through the neighborhood, my pace relaxed, but instinctively I avoided the route past the park. As I turned a corner, my heart plummeted. There, at the edge of the street, that same van waited, seemingly patient, as if it had been expecting me. The figure was gone, but I could feel the weight of its absence. A jolt of adrenaline shot through me, igniting every nerve in my body. I turned back, breaking into a brisk walk, then a jog, my legs propelling me faster than before. I needed to get away. But the feeling followed me, a specter lurking in the corners of my mind. No matter how far I moved, I could still feel those eyes, watching, waiting, calculating. I was no longer just avoiding a van. I was running from something much darker, something that had made me its prey. That Saturday night felt heavier than usual, the air thick with an unspoken tension. I had learned to dread my evening routine, the simplicity of a jog morphing into a ritual of hyper-awareness. The neighborhood was usually a calming backdrop, the rhythmic sound of my feet on the pavement a comforting melody. Yet, as I stepped into the darkness, I could feel a predator lurking just beyond the faint halo of the street lamps. I tightened my grip around my phone, the weight of it in my pocket offering little comfort. For the past week, I had been running the same route, circling the park on the far side of the block. Each night, the same van had been parked in the same spot, a rusted, nondescript vehicle that seemed to blend into the shadows. I had brushed it off initially, dismissing the oddity as coincidence. But after days of passing it, the chill of unease settled deeper into my bones. As I approached the van, I turned my gaze deliberately ahead, refusing to entertain the gnawing curiosity about its occupant. The street was quiet, the only sound being my breath and the distant rustling of leaves. But tonight, I couldn't shake the sensation of eyes on me. I quickened my pace, my heart thundering in my chest as I glanced to my left, where the van sat eerily still, the darkness shrouding its windows. I continued my route, focusing on the rhythm of my legs and the way my feet struck the pavement, but when I reached the park, I noticed him. The same figure from my peripheral vision the previous nights. He stood at the edge of the trees, blending into the shadows, but I could see him watching me, his eyes glinting in the dim light, a predator observing its prey. Instinct kicked in, and I picked up speed, pushing myself harder until my lungs burned. I made a mental note to alter my path, needing to escape the familiar cycle that had begun to suffocate me. The following night, I would take the longer route, through the residential streets where the warmth of home felt closer. The next evening, I set off with a new determination. I traced an unfamiliar path, hoping the change would bring solitude instead of dread. As I jogged, I forced my mind to think of anything but the figure in the shadows, the van waiting like an unwelcome specter. The route was picturesque, lined with well-kept houses, their windows glowing with the light of evening activities, parents sitting on porches, laughter drifting through the air. Yet, the illusion of safety shattered abruptly when I rounded a corner and spotted the rusted van parked at the end of the street. Panic surged through me, paralyzing and overwhelming. How had he found me? Every muscle in my body screamed to turn back, but fear locked me in place. I forced myself to keep running, urging my legs to move as fast as they could carry me. As I passed the van, I risked a glance. The figure was not in sight, but that did little to calm my racing heart. If he had been lurking here too, I had unknowingly led him straight to me. I needed to escape, to go home and never run this late again. Eyes forward, I pushed myself to quicken my pace. The streetlights began to flicker, and a chilling breeze swept through the night. I turned down a side street, desperate for a fresh path, but my breath caught in my throat when I saw him again, a mere block away, moving with a casual nonchalance that masked an underlying danger. He had closed the distance, his strides fluid and confident, as though he had been waiting for this moment to follow me. My instinct screamed for me to flee. I turned sharply, darting into an alley, the shadows swallowing me whole. The air was different here, thick with the stench of garbage and decay. The sound of my breathing grew louder, an echoing reminder of my vulnerable state. I felt trapped, the narrow walls closing in as I glanced back to see if he had followed. He stood at the mouth of the alley, silhouetted against the streetlight, an ominous figure in the dusk. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes pierced through the darkness, locking onto mine like a predator sizing up its prey. A shiver raced down my spine as an unsettling realization washed over me. He was toying with me, enjoying my fear. My heart hammered in my chest as I turned back into the alley, my only thought to find an exit. Panic surged, propelling me forward even as I trembled. The alley twisted and turned, a labyrinth of shadows, muffled sounds echoing around me. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, a frantic percussion keeping pace with my desperate flight. I burst out of the alley into a small park, the space illuminated by the glow of street lamps. For a moment, I felt relief wash over me, but it was short-lived. As I glanced over my shoulder, I saw him emerge from the darkness, moving with an ease that made my stomach churn. He had followed me here, too. I sprinted toward the opposite side of the park, scanning the area for anyone who could help me, but the place was deserted. My legs burned, and my side ached, but I pushed through the pain. I needed to find safety, to disappear. But he was still there, his presence a menacing shadow that followed every frantic step I took. I had to make a choice. I could keep running, but how far could I go? I could scream, but would anyone hear me? The darkness loomed around me, thickening like a shroud. He was getting closer. With a surge of adrenaline, I veered toward the street, hoping the emptiness beyond would offer a chance to escape. I sprinted, the world around me becoming a blur. My breath came in ragged gasps, and as I neared the end of the street, fear twisted into desperation. Suddenly, I heard a low, taunting laugh that echoed in the stillness. The sound sent a jolt of ice through my veins. I wasn't just running from a man. I was running from a nightmare that seemed all too real, and I didn't know how to stop it. It was a week since I first noticed the van, a dull gray block of metal parked like a sentinel on the corner of Maple and Fifth, its presence a small yet potent stone of anxiety lodged in my chest. I tried to dismiss it, telling myself that it was just a coincidence. A delivery truck, perhaps. But as the days passed, the van remained, and so did the feeling of being quietly watched. I could still hear the rhythmic thudding of my heart, echoing in the silence of the early morning. The air was brisk and cold against my skin, so I wrapped my arms around myself, bracing for the familiar discomfort of a late-night jog. As I rounded the corner, the van sat there, looming in the shadows. The driver's side door stood ajar just enough for me to see a glimpse of the dark interior, but I quickly averted my eyes, choosing instead to focus on the trail ahead. Somewhere in the back of my mind, instinct told me to turn back, to abandon the run altogether. But I shook off the warning, unwilling to concede defeat to an irrational fear. After all, I was a grown woman. I was fit, capable, and more than willing to fight back against any shadows that dared encroach upon my freedom. Yet, each time I passed that van, I could feel the weight of a gaze pressing down on me. Each night, I tried to convince myself that I was imagining it, that the slight figure lingering in the shadows was just a trick of the light. But the unease settled deeper, a root burrowing into my mind, stealing my focus and making every stride feel heavier. Tonight was no different. As I neared the spot where the van waited, I stole a glance over my shoulder. My heart dropped. The figure was there. I couldn't make out much, just a slim outline clad in dark clothing, standing against the lamplight in an almost decorative stillness. The way he shifted slightly as I approached sent a shiver crawling up my spine. I picked up my pace, breathing heavier, the sound echoing in the stillness. With each footfall, I felt a tug of panic, an underlying urge to flee. The figure didn't step forward, he merely watched, a statue in the darkness. I refused to look back again, forcing my legs to carry me past the van and onto the familiar stretch of path that led toward the park. The following nights blurred together. Each run became a ritual of adrenaline and dread. The van remained, the figure steadfastly watching as I passed. I cannot say I didn't consider changing my route earlier. The thought lingered, but each time I hesitated, paralyzed by the fear of the unknown. Would he follow me? Was he even real, or simply a figment of my anxious mind? Then, one fateful night, I took the plunge. I turned left into a side street, heart racing, convinced that I could outsmart whoever was stalking me. The initial rush of freedom coursed through my veins. I was escaping the shadows. Yet, as I reached the edge of the park, I froze. The figure was there, perched upon a bench in the pool of light cast from a nearby lamppost, clearly waiting for me. My breath hitched, and I felt my pulse quicken as a layer of cold sweat enveloped me. No familiar van, not even the dull gray of steel, just him, that ominous silhouette that haunted my every step. This was not a mere coincidence. It was as if the streets themselves had conspired to draw him closer, to trap me. I turned on my heel, panic overtaking me. This time, the route back felt different, more like a chase than a jog. With each step, I could feel the weight of his gaze creeping closer. The hairs on my neck prickled, and I fought against the urge to look over my shoulder. I could almost sense him gaining on me, the sound of my feet slapping against the pavement drowned out by the heavy thud of my heart. As I continued my desperate sprint, I caught sight of the van just ahead. A wave of relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The driver's side door stood open, the shadows inside deep and inviting, yet ominous. A part of me wanted to run straight past, to keep going and never look back, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped, cornered like prey. I needed to confront this. It was the only way I could take my power back. Summoning every ounce of courage, I approached the van slowly. My breath caught in my throat, but I called out into the darkness, my voice trembling and unsure. "Who are you? What do you want?" Silence returned, heavy and oppressive. The figure, still a distance away, did not answer. I could feel the tension in the air, the world around me holding its breath. Perhaps he had expected me to cower, to run. But here I was, standing firm, the fading light flickering at my back. Then, something shifted. The figure took a step closer, and my heart raced as I realized he was not just watching, he was coming for me. Panic spiraled within me, and I turned, running again, panic leading my feet faster than reason could grasp. The van blurred behind me, its comforting presence replaced by shadows stretching into the darkness. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being hunted, that I had merely exchanged one predator for another. Breathless and terrified, I ran on, desperate to shake the fear that gripped my heart, terrified of the reality that I could no longer deny. The darkness was alive, and so was the thing that followed. The chill of autumn had settled into the air, clinging to my skin like the damp fog that rolled in off the river each night. My headlamp flickered as I stepped outside, illuminating the path ahead with a weak glow. The familiar routine of lacing up my sneakers calmed my nerves, but there was an undercurrent of anxiety that pulled in my gut, threatening to spill over. The van was still there, parked at the same spot across from the park entrance, its dark windows like empty eyes fixed on my movements. I had tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that the world didn't revolve around my frail sense of safety. But each night, as I jogged past that van, I felt the weight of something sinister lurking just beyond my periphery. The first few nights had been manageable, my focus on the rhythm of my breath and the comforting beat of my music. But the figure had started to appear, a silhouette in the shadows, always watching, always waiting. He never approached, yet I sensed his presence like a storm on the horizon. I had run countless loops past that van, each time bracing for an encounter that never came. But tonight, something felt different. The streetlights buzzed ominously, casting elongated shadows that danced eerily in my path. I picked up my pace, the steady beating of my heart evoking an urgency I couldn't quite place. But as I neared the van, a flicker of movement caught my eye. I turned my head just in time to see him, tall, gaunt, leaning against a lamppost as if he had been waiting for me to pass. He wasn't just a shadow anymore. He was flesh, a malicious presence that tightened around my lungs. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep running, pushing my legs to move faster. The light from my headlamp bounced off the cobblestones, illuminating the path ahead that felt suddenly infinite, yet perilously close. I rounded the corner, my feet pounding against the pavement, and made the split-second decision to change my route. The river path would be quieter, away from the prying eyes of the van and its occupant. The air smelled of damp earth and decay, each breath drawing in the essence of the darkened world surrounding me. I thought I had escaped him, but the oppressive feeling of being hunted lingered. I glanced back over my shoulder, my heart hammering against my ribs, and there he was, much closer now, a figure shrouded in darkness, moving with an unsettling ease. Panic clawed at my throat. I sprinted down the riverbank, my instinct roaring to flee. The water lapped at the shore, its rhythmic sound a reminder of how alive the world could feel, yet I felt trapped in a nightmare. I ran harder, as if the act of moving faster could somehow erase him from my reality. But he was faster. I could hear his footsteps echoing behind me, a dreadful cadence that mirrored my own. I risked another glance back, and dread coiled in my stomach. He was gaining on me. His face was partially obscured by the shadows, but I caught a glimpse of a twisted smile that sent ice through my veins. I reached a fork in the path, and the decision was visceral. To the right lay the route back toward the park and the van. To the left was a narrow trail lined with thick trees, a gamble, but perhaps my only chance. I veered left, darting into the dense foliage. The branches scraped against my arms, tearing at my shirt, but I pressed on, desperate to find safety. As I navigated the darkened trail, I heard him behind me, his breath now a chilling taunt. It filled the air with a grotesque intimacy, as though he relished the chase. I stumbled over roots and stones, my legs fatigued and trembling, but I couldn't slow down. My lungs burned, and when I turned to glance back one last time, I saw him emerging from the shadows, his figure more defined now, a grotesque silhouette against the moonlight. My heart dropped. I was losing ground, and the isolation of the trail wrapped around me like a noose. I needed to find a way out. I spotted a cluster of trees ahead, their gnarled branches reaching like skeletal hands. I ducked between them, hoping to hide, to become one with the darkness. I pressed my back against the rough bark, holding my breath. Silence enveloped me, save for the distant rush of the river. Had I lost him? I didn't dare breathe, didn't dare move. Each second felt like an eternity, time stretching thin. I was just beginning to allow a shred of hope to take root when the sound of my heartbeat was drowned out by the unmistakable crunch of footsteps on leaves. He found me. Fear locked me in place even as I fought against it. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as I risked another glance. He stood at the edge of the trees, peering into the shadows where I hid. His eyes glinted in the moonlight, predatory and unyielding. I wanted to scream, to flee, but my body sat paralyzed, trapped in a web of terror. Moments stretched between us, and I realized he wasn't just watching, he was savoring this moment. The chase had become a game, and I was the prey. I could feel the cold air wrap around me, a harbinger of the horror that awaited. And in that darkness, I understood that this was not just about a late-night jog. This was a confrontation with something far more sinister than any of my nightmares had prepared me for. The air felt thicker that night, heavy with an unsettling tension that wrapped around me like a shroud. I had spent the day replaying every moment of my recent runs in my mind, each frame of anxiety ticking away like a countdown to something inevitable. It had been 2 weeks since I first noticed the van, a shadowy gray body idling silently at the corner of Maple and Fifth, always lurking, always watching. Each time I passed, its presence gnawed at the edges of my mind, transforming my nightly jog from a simple escape into a ritual of unease. I tightened the laces on my sneakers, my breath catching slightly as I stepped onto the cracked pavement. I had hoped that changing my route would alleviate some of the suffocating dread, but last night had proved otherwise. The figure had found me. I could still picture him, a tall silhouette, a faceless shadow against the dim streetlights. Watching. Waiting. It was as if he was my own personal specter, tethered to my anxiety, awaiting the moment I would show weakness. As I settled into my stride, I felt the familiar rhythm of my heartbeat, a frantic echo against the backdrop of the deserted streets. I kept my eyes straight ahead, forcing myself to focus on the sensation of the wind against my skin rather than the paranoia creeping in at the corners of my consciousness. But my resolve frayed quickly. I made it to the intersection, and instinctively, I glanced over my shoulder. The van sat there, a motionless predator cloaked in shadow. My stomach twisted. I had told myself it was just my imagination running wild, a trick of the mind overreacting to a cloudy moonlit night. But as I turned down Maple, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being hunted. I picked up my pace, the sound of my footsteps punctuating the silence. Each thudding beat felt like an alarm, drawing attention to my presence. I reached the next block, where I had planned to make a sharp turn, hoping the change in trajectory would confuse whatever watched me, but the air turned stale as I rounded the corner. There he was, the same figure, standing just beyond the reach of the streetlight like a fleeting nightmare. My heart plummeted. "What do you want?" I whispered, more to myself than to him. But he didn't answer. He just stood there, unyielding, an unsettling grin stretching across his lips that shouldn't have been there, a smile devoid of warmth. I couldn't see his eyes, but I felt them, piercing into me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I turned on my heel, my instincts kicking in, and sprinted back towards the route I had just abandoned. The faint sound of my breath grew louder, each inhale growing frantic. I could hear him behind me, or at least I thought I could. Was it just my imagination, conjuring terror from my every footfall? I risked another glance over my shoulder, and to my horror, he had closed the distance. He was now a shadow trailing just a few paces behind me. Panic surged through me as I pushed myself harder. My legs burned, muscles straining against the urge to slow down, but I couldn't stop. I raced through the familiar streets, the route now twisted with fear and foreboding. Somehow, he always seemed to be right there, lurking in the fringes, a warped reflection of my own desperation. I rounded another corner, desperate to lose him. The night air was sharp against my lungs. I gasped for breath as I spotted the small park up ahead, the one I had always avoided after dark. But at that moment, it was my only option. I sprinted across the open expanse, and the shadows of the trees swallowed me whole. The rustling leaves whispered warnings I didn't want to hear. I paused, panting heavily, straining my ears for any sign of pursuit. The sounds of the night were oppressive, the chirping of crickets now too loud, the distant rustle of a raccoon turning into a sinister skittering. Was he still out there? My heart raced with the uncertainty. Then, a faint noise broke through the quiet, unmistakable footsteps crunching on the gravel path beyond the trees. I ducked behind a large oak, my heart thrumming against my ribcage like a prisoner trying to escape. I couldn't see him, but I could hear him getting closer. His footsteps stopped. I held my breath, praying he would move on, that he would just disappear into the night. But the silence stretched too long. I could practically feel his gaze sweeping the area, searching for me. Desperation clawed at me. I couldn't stay here. I had to move. I took a step back, careful not to make a sound, but in my haste, I misjudged the strength of the tree branch above me. It snapped under my weight, and I froze, my heart plummeting. "Where are you?" His voice drifted through the trees, low, mocking, and echoing like a death knell. I bolted, darting from my hiding place, the darkness swallowing me as I ran deeper into the park. I felt the adrenaline rush through me, fueling my flight. The chill of the night surrounded me, and for a fleeting moment, I felt alive until I heard his footsteps again, pounding against the ground behind me, relentless. My lungs burned as I rounded a bend, praying for an escape. A sense of dread weighed heavily in the air, thickening my resolve. I would not be his prey. But every time I glanced back, the figure loomed closer, his silhouette sharpening against the darkness, a harbinger of doom lurking just out of reach. I had entered a nightmare from which there was no waking. Story 4, Watched in the Woods. The Appalachian wilderness enveloped me in its vast, green embrace as I hiked deeper into the forest. I had come here to escape the suffocating buzz of city life, craving solitude and the crispness of nature. The towering pines whispered secrets with every gust of wind, their needles carpeted my path, and the scent of damp earth filled my lungs. It was beautiful, serene, just as I had imagined. As I set up camp, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows that stretched across the clearing. I pitched my tent near a bubbling creek, its soothing sounds a perfect soundtrack to my evening. The light of day faded, yielding to an indigo sky dotted with stars. I settled beside the fire, the crackling flames warding off the encroaching chill. I flipped through my backpack, pulling out a journal and a pencil, ready to jot down my thoughts. The first hour passed quietly, but as the night deepened, an unsettling feeling crawled up my spine. I brushed it off as paranoia. After all, venturing into the wilderness alone could make anyone feel a bit vulnerable. I picked up my phone to check the time, only to find the screen illuminated with a notification. A text message from an unknown number. I hesitated, a shiver of unease coursing through me. Cautiously, I opened it. My heart sank as I stared at the photos. The first one showed my tent, the second captured my campsite from the perspective of the trees. I was not alone. Someone had been watching me. I scrambled to my feet, the warmth of the fire suddenly feeling inadequate against the wave of dread washing over me. My mind raced. I quickly glanced around, searching the darkness for any sign of movement, any indication that I was not simply imagining this horror. My breath came quicker, shallow and panicked. Was it a prank? The area was known for hikers, but this felt different. The photos were taken moments ago. I texted back, my fingers trembling as I typed, "Who is this?" I cursed myself for not having a lock on my phone. There was no response. The silence of the woods pressed in around me, thick and suffocating. I considered my options. I could stay put, but what if this person was nearby? What if I was already too late? Waves of anxiety crashed over me. I ripped my gaze from the darkened trees and grabbed my backpack. I needed to leave. Now! I shoved my phone into my pocket, leaving the journal behind, turning my back on the flickering campfire that had felt so comforting a moment ago. With each step into the woods, I felt the weight of unseen eyes. The moon's silver light filtered through the canopy, illuminating the path ahead, but shadows lurked with every rustle of leaves. I stumbled over roots, the forest floor uneven and treacherous. Adrenaline surged as I quickened my pace, glancing back every few moments, half expecting to see someone emerging from the darkness. The trail was supposed to lead me back to the main road, but as I walked, the sense of being followed intensified. I pushed on, my breath ragged, heart pounding against my chest. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being hunted. Suddenly, my phone vibrated again, the sound cutting through the stillness like a knife. I almost didn't want to look, but curiosity and fear compelled me. I pulled the phone from my pocket, dreading what I might see. Another text, another photo. This one showed me from a distance, halfway down the trail, captured under the pale moonlight. I stood frozen, my stomach twisted with terror. It was clear, whoever it was, they were close. Without thinking, I bolted off the trail, crashing through the underbrush, desperate to put distance between myself and whoever was tracking me. My heart raced as branches snagged at my clothes, the thorns tearing at my skin. The forest felt alive, like a creature ready to swallow me whole. I could hear the faint sound of footsteps behind me, a deliberate and relentless pursuit. Panic surged again, urging me to keep moving. I stumbled, my foot catching on a root, and I fell hard against the ground. Pain shot through my ankle. I gritted my teeth and pushed through, determined not to let anything stop me. I couldn't give up now. My instinct screamed for me to escape from the unseen predator that hunted me. The deeper I went into the forest, the more I feared I was losing my way. The surrounding trees loomed like ancient sentinels, their twisted forms blocking my path. Every sound, every snap of a branch, every rustle of leaves reminded me I wasn't alone. I tried to focus on the trail, but it twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the wilderness. Or it was the road. Or it was safety. As the darkness thickened, I could feel it settling over me, heavy and suffocating. I stumbled forward, each step a battle against my fear. I needed to find a way out before night fully claimed the forest. My breath came in ragged gasps, sweat mixing with the dirt on my face. In the distance, I heard something, a low rustle, then a voice. It wasn't loud, but it echoed through the quiet of the night, chilling me to my core. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. My mind screamed at me to run, but part of me was paralyzed with fear, rooted to the spot. I strained to listen, my instinct screaming that whoever was chasing me was closing in. I had to move. Now! The sun hung low in the sky, painting the treetops with an orange hue that warned of the impending dusk. I had just finished setting up my tent, the bright green fabric stark against the browns and greens of the wilderness that surrounded me. The air was still, and for a moment, I relished the tranquility, the sounds of chirping birds and rustling leaves providing a soundtrack to my solitary escape. But that peace shattered when my phone buzzed, jolting me from my thoughts. I fished it out of my pocket, my heartbeat quickening when I saw the unknown number flash on the screen. Curiosity gnawed at me. I hesitated, the screen lighting up with a series of photos. My stomach dropped. The first image showed my campsite, the tent, and the small fire pit I had built. The next was a close-up of my backpack, its zipper partly open where I had carelessly stuffed my snacks. The last was a shot of me, taken from the trees with my back turned, completely unaware that someone had been watching me. A chill ran down my spine, and my instinct screamed at me to pack up and leave, but panic flooded my veins, leaving me paralyzed. I scrolled through the images again, the realization of my isolation crashing down upon me like a wave. I was alone, miles away from any help, with no one around to hear me scream. I could hear my heart thundering in my chest as I looked around, half expecting to see someone lurking between the trees, but the forest remained silent and still. I snapped back to reality and pressed the reply button, my fingers trembling as I typed, "Who is this?" I hit send, but a sick feeling crept into my gut as I realized how desperate I sounded. I didn't want to appear weak, but the thought of facing an unknown stalker made my throat constrict. The sun dipped further, and shadows grew longer, clawing at the edges of my campsite. I glanced at my watch. It was nearly 6. I still had time, I told myself. I could pack up and hike back to the trailhead before darkness fell. The thought of staying another moment felt suffocating, so I sprang into action. I unzipped my tent, quickly yanking out the sleeping bag, my clothes, and everything else I had brought. I shoved them into my backpack, the fabric straining against the weight. Panic propelled my movements, and I didn't bother to fold anything neatly. I just wanted to get out. As I zipped up the backpack, the hairs on the back of my neck prickled. I glanced around the campsite, half expecting to see someone standing there, but the trees held their secrets close. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was an experienced hiker. I had faced worse conditions than this. My mind, however, countered, reminding me that I had never faced a situation like this, being stalked in the isolation of the woods. I turned to the trail, the path winding ahead of me, cloaked in shadow. I hesitated, feeling the weight of the unseen eyes pressing down on me. The woods felt alive in a way I had never experienced before, the rustling of leaves carrying whispers of warnings. Every snap of a twig underfoot made my heart race. With one last look at the campsite, I stepped onto the trail and began to walk quickly, the sun slipping further behind the horizon. My thoughts raced alongside my footsteps. I needed to get to the car, drive to a motel, and call the police. Maybe that would be enough. My breathing became erratic, but I forced myself to focus on the rhythmic crunch of leaves underfoot. As I navigated the path, a darkening sky loomed overhead, the stars hidden behind the thick canopy. I felt so small, so insignificant against the enormity of the forest, and a chill settled into my bones. I pressed on, but with every step, the dread coiled tighter in my chest. I tried to shake the feeling off, to reassure myself that I was overreacting. Perhaps someone had happened upon my campsite earlier and snapped the photos for a laugh. But that thought felt flimsy, and my mind kept returning to the images on my phone, the way I had stood there, blissfully ignorant of the danger lurking close by. Then a sound pierced the stillness, a rustle, as if someone was moving through the underbrush. I froze, eyes darting to the source. My heart raced, pulsing in my ears as I strained to catch any hint of movement. The noise stopped, and for a moment, the forest held its breath, waiting. I took a shaky step forward, my instincts flaring up again. I couldn't keep going this way. I had to take a different path, disorient whoever was following me. I turned off the trail, pushing deeper into the woods, branches slapping against my arms as I stumbled through the undergrowth. The path became treacherous, roots sneaking up from the ground like fingers ready to trip me. I stumbled, nearly falling as the darkness closed in around me. I cursed under my breath, my heart pounding as I glanced back, half expecting to see someone emerge from the shadows. The forest seemed to swallow me, the darkness thickening with each step. I could feel the panic rising again, but I couldn't afford to let it take me. I had to find a way out. I had to keep moving. Eventually, I found a narrow trail that led me uphill, and I followed it, desperate for a higher vantage point, maybe even a clearer escape route. Just as I began to feel a flicker of hope, my phone buzzed again, the sound jarring in the stillness. I stopped, heart racing as I fished it out again. Another message from the unknown number. My fingers hovered over the screen, and I hesitated before opening it. I didn't want to see what horrors awaited me there, but I knew I had to. A new photo loaded, this one showing a close-up of my tent, its flaps flapping slightly in the evening breeze. The caption read, "Can't wait to see you in the dark." Fear coursed through my veins, and I dropped the phone, letting it clatter against the forest floor. I turned, dread anchoring me to the spot. I couldn't let this person find me. I couldn't let them win. I had to escape, before the woods fell silent around me, before I became prey in their twisted game. With renewed determination, I pressed on, the trees closing in around me, darkness swallowing the last remnants of light. The only sounds were my ragged breath and the distant rustle that I feared was not just the wind anymore. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows between the trees. I had thought the isolation of the Appalachian wilderness would be a reprieve, a chance to reconnect with nature and shed the weight of my routine. Now, each rustle of leaves seemed laden with unease. Every snap of a twig echoed like a warning. I sat on the edge of my tarp, heart racing, staring at the screen of my phone. The unknown number stared back at me as if it glared with malicious intent. I could hardly comprehend the images that filled my screen. They were all from moments earlier, my camp set up with the tent taut against the wind, my backpack leaning against a nearby tree, even a close-up shot of my boots as I had walked a few paces away to gather firewood. Panic surged through me. I wiped my clammy hands on my cargo pants, fighting the urge to scream. Who was watching me? And why? I had chosen this remote spot precisely for its seclusion, to escape the prying eyes of the world. But now, I felt like prey, hunted by a faceless predator lurking in the shadows of these ancient trees. I stared at the photos again, the sun now dipping below the treetops, the light fading with it. Night would come quickly here, and with it, darkness I wasn't sure I'd be able to navigate. I bolted to my feet, adrenaline flooding my veins. There had to be a way to backtrack the signal, to find out who was sending me these images. I hurriedly scrolled through my messages, looking for any clue, any mistake that might reveal a name or a location, but the number was nothing more than a string of digits. It could belong to anyone or no one at all. I felt a chill creep up my spine, a sensation that I was truly alone, but now more vulnerable than ever before. I needed to make a decision. I could sit here and wait for darkness to fall, or I could try to escape while I still had some semblance of daylight. The choice was clear, yet my feet felt like lead, my mind racing with images of a stranger lurking just beyond my sight, someone who knew my every move. I grabbed my backpack and hastily stuffed my essentials inside. My water bottle, flashlight, knife, and a few granola bars. The firewood I had gathered lay untouched. I couldn't stay here. As I stepped away from my camp, I scanned the surrounding trees, listening for any signs of movement. The forest felt alive, every whisper of wind, every rustle amplified in my heightened state. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus. I had a map tucked in my pocket. I needed to head back to the main trail. It was my only chance to reach safety before night enveloped me completely. I moved carefully, retracing my steps, eyes darting back and forth between the shadows. The path wound deeper into the woods, and I could feel the weight of the trees pressing down around me. Branches reached out like skeletal fingers, and every snap of a twig made my heart race anew. The sun slipped below the horizon, and with it, the light retreated, casting an eerie gloom across the foliage. I stumbled over roots and rocks, my focus wavering as panic gnawed at the edges of my mind. I pulled out my phone again, hoping for a signal, some form of reassurance that the outside world still existed. The screen flickered in the dim light, but no bars greeted me, only the disappointment of isolation. I cursed under my breath, shoving it back into my pocket. I pressed on, the shadows deepening around me, the chill of the approaching night sinking in. My breath came in quick bursts, and my surroundings grew still, the silence hanging thick. A sense of dread settled in my stomach, the primal fear of being pursued. I quickened my pace, every rustle making me glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone materialize from between the trees. In that moment, I heard it, a crunching sound, deliberate and slow. My heart froze as I turned, fighting the instinct to flee. The darkness hid the source, but I could feel something, someone watching me. I took a step back, my instincts clamoring for me to run, but I forced myself to breathe. I needed to think clearly. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small against the vastness of the forest. Silence enveloped me, but the crunching continued, closing in. My pulse raced, and I instinctively gripped the knife in my pocket, ready to defend myself if necessary. I needed to confront whatever lurked in the shadows. I couldn't let fear dictate my actions. The crunching paused, but my heartbeat hammered in my ears, drowning out all other sounds. I crouched low and peered into the darkness, straining to make out shapes within the shadows. The low light concealed everything, yet something glinted faintly, a reflection that resembled eyes watching me from the underbrush. Without thinking, I bolted down the trail, adrenaline coursing through me. I could hear the sound of branches snapping behind me, an echo of pursuit that ignited my fight or flight response. I ran blindly, the forest becoming a blur of shapes and colors, each turn feeling like a gamble I had to take. The trail opened up slightly, revealing a small clearing. I skidded to a halt, panting heavily, and realized I had lost the path. My chest tightened, panic rising again. I whipped around, looking for any sign of life, anything that could help me find my way out. And then, there it was, a flicker of light in the distance, a soft glow that beckoned me. The light felt like a beacon of hope amidst the darkness, and I sprinted towards it, determination overriding my fear. I could hear the crunching of footsteps behind me, but I pushed harder, adrenaline propelling me forward. The clearing expanded, revealing a cabin nestled against the trees, its windows illuminated with a warm golden light. I dashed toward it, desperation clawing in my throat. My mind raced with questions as I reached the front door, pounding on it with my fists. I had no idea who might be inside, but I had no choice. I needed help. I needed safety. My heart thundered in my chest as I waited, the sound of my pursuer fading into the distance. Hope surged within me as the door creaked open, revealing a figure silhouetted against the warm glow of the cabin. With one last glance over my shoulder, I stepped inside, praying I hadn't just walked into another trap. The early afternoon sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the forest floor as I paced back and forth near my tent. My hands trembled slightly, and I fought the urge to glance around, half expecting to catch a glimpse of someone in the trees. The reality of the situation weighed on me, thick and oppressive. I had been in these woods for 2 days now, and a creeping sensation slithered down my spine, a presence, an awareness of being watched. I pulled my phone from my pocket for the millionth time, hoping for a signal, but all I received was the same cruel emptiness that mocked my isolation. It had been hours since that first chilling text, a mundane message accompanied by 2 photos. The first captured the moment I had set up my tent, the second, a close-up shot of my backpack, snug against the roots of a twisted oak. My heart raced at the memory of the faces I imagined behind the screen, faceless, lurking, ready to shatter the fragile safety I had constructed around myself. I had come to the Appalachian wilderness seeking solitude, a chance to reconnect with myself, far from the chatter of modern life. Instead, I felt like trapped prey, and the wilds that had once seemed inviting now loomed like a prison. Each rustle of leaves made me jump, and the peaceful chirping of birds twisted into mocking laughter in my ears. Desperate to regain control, I decided I would take a walk down the narrow trail that wound away from my campsite. I needed to clear my head, to push back against the fear that gnawed at me like a hungry wolf. With each step, I focused on the crunch of twigs underfoot and the fresh scent of pine that filled the air. The thrum of nature surrounded me, but it felt distant, as though the world had shifted, leaving me stranded in a pocket of dread. I walked further into the woods, the sunlight filtering through the canopy above, casting dappled shadows on the ground. I tried to ground myself, reeling in my racing thoughts. How could the person behind the text know precisely where I was? Had they watched me closely, trailing me from the moment I entered the park? I tried to shake the paranoia, betting on the idea that it was just an elaborate prank or perhaps a coincidence. But the reality of it hung like a weight in my chest, heavy and ominous. I picked up my pace, urgency pushing me faster down the twisting trail. As I walked, I spotted the remnants of an old campsite, its fire pit long overgrown with moss and weeds. I paused, taking inventory of the area. It was too quiet, Something felt off. As soon as that thought entered my mind, I heard a snap of branches behind me. My heart raced, and I turned quickly, but nothing was there, just the whispering trees and the distant call of a crow. I was alone, yet that feeling of being watched persisted, prickling at the back of my neck. I decided to head back, allowing the trail to guide me home. The sun was beginning to dip lower, casting an orange hue that seeped into the forest. Shadows lengthened, and the woods grew darker, more menacing. I quickened my pace, a low sense of urgency bubbling in my gut. Once I reached my campsite, I wasted no time and began to hastily pack my belongings. My hands fumbled with the tent stakes, and I cursed under my breath as I dropped one into the grass, the metal clattering against a rock. I picked it up and shoved it into my bag, anxiety tightening around me like a noose. I could feel the sun's warmth fading, every second pulling me closer to darkness. I zipped up the tent and hoisted my backpack onto my shoulders. Just as I turned to leave, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket. I froze, heart hammering against my ribs. With shaking hands, I pulled it out again, willing it to be a message from a friend, someone I could trust. But it was the same unknown number. I stared at the screen, breathless. The photo displayed sent a cold wave crashing over my skin, a picture of my tent, taken from a distance that suggested someone had been watching me from the trees. A sense of doom washed over me, mingling with panic. I had to get out of there. As I tore my gaze from the screen, I began to move, forcing myself to breathe steadily despite the fear clawing at my throat. I stepped onto the narrow trail, my senses heightened, straining to catch any sound that might signal danger. As I walked, I tried to mentally map my route back to the parking lot. I would have to navigate in darkness soon, and that thought made my heart race even faster. I descended deeper into the underbrush, the trees closing in around me. The path twisted and turned, and though I could still make out faint trails of light from the sky, the shadows grew longer and more oppressive. I pushed forward, not daring to look back. My ears rang with the sound of my heartbeat, drowning out the forest's ambient noise, making me feel like I was the only one left in this vast wilderness. Every rustle of leaves set my nerves on edge. I strained to hear anything, footsteps, the snap of a twig, anything that might indicate I was now alone. I focused only on moving forward, ignoring the sweat pooling on my brow and the scratch of branches against my arms. Then, just as I thought I could gain a semblance of control over my fear, I heard it. A soft, deliberate crunching of leaves behind me. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart lurching into my throat. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I didn't. I stood frozen, fear anchoring me in place, as the sound grew louder, closer. I was being followed, and the weight of that realization sent ice through my veins. I forced myself to turn and face the darkness, breath shallow. The forest felt alive, every shadow seeming to elongate and twist menacingly. It was just the trees playing tricks, I told myself, but a whisper of doubt sneaked its way into my thoughts. Then the crunching stopped. I strained to see, my eyes desperately searching the darkening woods, scanning for any telltale sign of movement. My heart raced as silence enveloped me, thick and suffocating. It felt like the forest was holding its breath, waiting, watching. I couldn't linger any longer. I turned on my heel and bolted down the path, fear propelling me forward. The ground rushed beneath my feet as I plunged deeper into the unforgiving wilderness. The chase had begun, and with each stride, I hoped against hope that I could escape whatever horror had taken a keen interest in me. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that danced eerily among the trees. It had been hours since I received the chilling text, yet the sensation of being watched clung to me like a second skin. I attempted to shake the feeling off, but the forest felt alive around me, branches creaking under the weight of unseen presences. Each rustle of leaves made my heart race, and I found myself staring into the dense undergrowth, half expecting to see a figure emerging from the shadows. The photos had been innocuous at first, 2 images taken from directly behind me as I set up my tent. The first showed me fumbling with the poles, my backpack lying open nearby. In the second, I sat cross-legged on the ground, scanning the wilderness around me. My heart sank further with the realization that someone had been close enough to watch me, to capture those moments without my knowledge. Panic tightened its grip as I rummaged through my backpack for my phone, hoping that I would find some clue about the number that had messaged me. But the device remained silent, offering no answers. With dusk approaching, I made the decision to leave the camp behind. I needed to get away from this spot, this feeling of vulnerability. I quickly packed my belongings, my hands shaking with urgency. The sun dipped lower, and shadows lengthened, swallowing the light and with it, my sense of security. The forest transformed, and the familiar trails began to look foreign and menacing. I moved quickly, guided only by the instincts that screamed for me to escape. Once I stepped onto a path that wound deeper into the woods, the air thickened with anxiety. I felt the ground beneath my feet shift as if it were alive, and I wondered if the forest might be conspiring against me. Every snap of a twig, every whisper of the wind sent jolts of terror through me. I didn't know who was watching, but I could feel them. I had to keep moving. The possibility of nightfall added urgency to my retreat. As I walked, I replayed the minutes before the text in my mind, searching for clues that might explain how someone could have tracked me. Had I been careless? I had stopped to take a sip of water, had my back turned while adjusting the straps on my tent. Any number of moments could have exposed me. My heart pounded each time I heard a rustle in the underbrush, and every time I glanced over my shoulder, I half expected to see a shadow trailing behind me. The trail narrowed, and I stumbled over exposed roots. I swore under my breath, a mix of frustration and fear. I was going too fast. I needed to focus. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, reminding myself that I was a seasoned hiker. A twinge of doubt prickled in my mind. Did experience matter against someone who had the advantage of surprise? Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket, the sound like thunder in the otherwise silent woods. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart leaping into my throat. I fumbled for the device, dread pooling in my stomach as I saw the screen light up, not with a familiar name, but with that same unknown number. Fingers trembling, I opened the message. It was another photo, and my breath caught in my throat. It was taken from above, a wide shot of the path I was on, my path. I stood at the center of the image, oblivious, a lone figure against the vast wilderness. It was recent, the light was fading, and only moments had passed since I had been at that exact spot. I glanced around wildly, the hairs on my neck standing on end. Had they been following me this whole time? There was no way I could keep moving forward like this. My instinct screamed that I had to find shelter, but not my tent. No, my tent felt like a trap now. I needed somewhere safer, somewhere the watcher would not think to look. Spurred by desperation, I darted off the path and into the thickets. The underbrush clutched at my legs, branches snagging my clothes and tearing at my skin. I pressed on, driven by fear, until I found a shallow cave carved into the side of a hill. It was dark and damp inside, but it was my only chance. I squeezed through the opening, my heart racing as I got deeper into the darkness. Once inside, I pressed my back against the wall, straining to hear any sound outside. The world outside was muted, the forest seemingly holding its breath. I waited, my phone clutched tightly in my hand, prepared to fight against the urge to check for any further messages. I didn't want to know, but I couldn't help myself. Time slipped away as I listened for movement, the darkness closing in around me. Every creak of the earth was amplified, every distant rustle felt like footsteps drawing nearer. I pulled my knees to my chest, heart pounding as I was consumed by fear. I wished for the sun a mere hour ago. It had been a comforting presence. Now, it felt as distant as hope. Then, a sound pierced the silence, a crack, sharp and deliberate, like footsteps on fallen leaves. The shadow of a figure moved outside the cave's entrance, a darkness that felt alive. I pressed myself deeper into the stone, my breath quieting as I strained to listen. They were here, hunting for me. The thought stole my breath, and I felt the panic rising again. My thoughts raced. I couldn't stay here. I needed to move, to escape, but the fear of being caught made my insides twist into knots. The figure paused, and in the suffocating black, I held my breath, praying for them to move on. The forest had gone eerily still again, and for a moment, I dared to hope I had been unnoticed. But then, just outside the cave, I heard the unmistakable sound of fabric brushing against stone, a whisper of movement that sent shivers down my spine. I had to decide. I could stay and risk being discovered, or I could make a run for it, straight into the abyss of the night. Each option felt like a death sentence. The question haunted me, who was out there? And why? As I weighed my choices, an overwhelming realization settled over me. I had to escape before I became another shadow in the forest, lost to the very wilderness I had sought for solace. With a final breath, I prepared to move. Story 5, Midnight at the Last Stop. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering intermittently, casting a sickly glow on the empty train station. I had missed my last train home, the one that rattled through the dark countryside just after midnight. My phone had died, the screen going dark just moments after I had stepped off the bus, leaving me helpless and disoriented. As I sat alone on the cold metal bench, I could hear nothing but the distant hum of machinery and the occasional echo of my own breathing. The station was desolate, the kind of place that felt suspended in time. I had always loved the thrill of train travel, the rush of anticipation as I boarded, the journey unfolding before me like a story yet to be told. But tonight, the excitement had evaporated, replaced by an unsettling stillness that clung to the air, thick as fog. I glanced around, the empty platforms stretching out like dark alleyways, shadows cloaked corners and crevices, and I felt every inch of that solitude wrap around me. As I sat, trying to ignore the gnawing anxiety creeping in, I noticed a figure in the distance. He emerged from the shadows, a man in a long, dark coat that fluttered slightly with each step. He was unremarkable at first glance, nondescript features, scruffy hair, but as he moved closer, I felt a chill sneak its way down my spine. "Hey there," he called out, his voice low and gravelly. "You missed your train?" I forced a smile, though my heart pounded against my rib cage. "Yeah, I did." I shifted in my seat, hoping he would take the hint and move along. "That's a bummer," he said, planting himself on the bench next to me, too close for comfort. "Looks like you're stuck here for a while." I nodded, the sweetness of freedom replaced by the bitterness of confinement. "I'll just wait for the next one." His lips curled into an unsettling grin, revealing a flash of teeth that seemed too sharp, too eager. "You know, it's not safe to be out here alone at this time of night." I swallowed hard, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. "I can manage." "Oh, I'm sure you can," he said, leaning forward, elbows resting on his knees, eyes locked onto mine. His gaze was intense, almost predatory. "But you shouldn't have to. I can help you." "Thanks, but I'm fine." I glanced at the empty tracks, longing for the reassuring sight of a train pulling in, a chugging reminder that I wasn't alone in the world. He chuckled softly, the sound grating like nails on chalkboard. "You know, it's funny. People think they're safe in public places, but you never know who's watching." He leaned closer, and I could smell the faint whiff of something rancid on his breath, a mixture of tobacco and something else I couldn't quite place. "Really, I should just wait here, I insisted, the edges of my voice trembling despite my efforts to sound steady. His smile faded, replaced by a look that pierced through me, unsettling in a way that made my skin crawl. You shouldn't be so quick to dismiss help, you know. I stood up, instinctively putting distance between us, my legs feeling unsteady. I think I'll be okay. I just need to wait. Don't go anywhere, he said, his tone shifting to something resembling a command. The playful edge in his voice had morphed into something darker, more dangerous. You wouldn't want to get lost. I took a step back, my heart racing. I'm not lost. Sure you are, he replied, rising from the bench. He towered over me now, blocking my view of the station entrance. Out here, it's easy to get lost. But I can help you find your way. Fear coursed through me like ice water. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to escape this man in this suffocating place, but I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed by a mix of fear and confusion. He didn't belong here, yet somehow, he felt more rooted to the dimness of the station than I did. I think I should go, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, as I took another tentative step back. Go where? He asked, cocking his head, a mockery of concern flooding his features. It's late. There's nothing out there for you. Nothing but dark. His words hung in the air like a noose, tightening around my throat. I could feel the weight of the emptiness surrounding us, the echoes of my own heartbeat drowning everything else out. My throat tightened, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I want you to stay, he continued, though his voice dripped with a sinister undertone. Just a little while longer. You might like it here. Inside, a primal instinct roared to life, urging me to flee, to break the hold he had on me. I turned, scanning the station for any sign of life, any passerby who could intervene, but it was just us, two figures against the backdrop of abandonment. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until I said, I really need to go. His smile returned, but this time it was devoid of warmth. Not yet. The darkness loomed, and I realized that whatever small measure of safety I felt was a lie. In that terrible moment, I was aware of just how exposed I was, how desperate my situation had become, and as I faced him again, I understood the truth. I was never as alone as I thought. The fluorescent lights above flickered rhythmically, casting an eerie glow throughout the cavernous train station. I sat hunched over on the cold bench, my fingers intertwined, desperately trying to recall what had gone wrong. 1 minute I had been rushing through the terminal, the sound of my suitcase wheels echoing against the polished tiles, and the next, I had watched my train pull away, the lights of its carriages disappearing into the night. A chill crept through my jacket, the air turning damp and heavy. The usual bustle of travelers had dwindled to nothingness, leaving me alone and exposed. How had I allowed this to happen? It was after midnight, and I could hear the distant rumble of thunder, promising rain soon. My only solace was the rhythmic ticking of the station clock, though it was less a comfort and more a reminder of my growing isolation. Then I saw him. At first, he appeared at the far end of the platform, a dark silhouette against the tarnished metal of the rails. I squinted, trying to discern his features as he approached, but the flickering lights cast long shadows that danced menacingly around him. When he stepped into the light, I felt a rush of unease grip me. He was tall, with a gaunt face lined by unkempt hair that fell into his eyes. A faded jacket draped loosely over his thin frame, and his hands were stuffed deep into his pockets. He moved with a strange kind of swagger that unsettled me, as if he reveled in the emptiness of the station. "Hey there," he said, his voice deep yet surprisingly smooth, like gravel rolling down a hill. "You missed your train?" I nodded cautiously, keeping my gaze fixed on the fading light of the platform behind him. It felt wrong to engage, but the vulnerability of my situation compelled me to respond. "Yeah, I did," I managed, my voice barely coming out as a whisper. just waiting for the next one. Next one? He chuckled, the sound echoing unnaturally between the walls. Could be a while, you know. These late-night arrivals can be unpredictable. He took a step closer, and I instinctively shifted back on the bench. Just trying to stay warm, I muttered, though the chill in my bones was more about fear than the temperature. Smart choice, he said, nodding as if he understood something I didn't. You don't want to be wandering around here alone. It can get dangerous. I glanced around, the shadows of the station seemingly closing in on us. I'm okay, really. I'll just wait. He studied me for a moment, his eyes narrowing in an unnerving way. You don't seem okay. You look a little scared. His gaze made me feel exposed, as though he could see through the facade I had put up. I'm just tired, I replied, wishing he would take the hint and leave. Why don't I help? He suggested, his tone shifting to an unsettling cheerfulness. I can make sure you get to a safe place. I know this station better than anyone. I appreciate it, but I think I'll just stay here, I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. My instinct screamed at me to keep distance, yet the world beyond the station felt equally menacing. He frowned, and his expression transformed into something darker. You don't trust me? I'm just trying to help. I don't mean to be rude, I stammered, my heart racing. I just don't think it's safe to go anywhere right now. Safe? He laughed, a sharp, discordant sound that echoed through the emptiness. You think it's safe here? This place is a trap. You're better off with me. I promise, I can help you. The desperation in his voice wrapped around me like a vice. I could feel my breath quickening, a primal urge to flee surging through my veins. Please, just let me be, I said, my voice trembling. He stepped closer, the shadows deepening around him as his features morphed into an unsettling mask of intent. Don't you see? You're trapped here. You need to stay put. I'll make sure nothing happens to you. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. Every instinct told me to stand up, to bolt, but his presence loomed too large, too suffocating. Before I could finish, a train whistle pierced the silence, echoing through the station and cutting through the tension that hung between us. My heart leaped in response. I glanced down the platform, hopeful yet terrified, my eyes straining toward the flickering lights in the distance. There's a train, I said hastily, my voice laced with urgency. I should catch it. No, he barked, his eyes wide with a sudden intensity that sent a jolt of fear racing through me. You're not going anywhere. Not while I'm here. Panic rose within me, a flood of adrenaline urging me to run. But the thought of provoking him held me captive, my body frozen like prey cornered by a predator. He took another step forward, and I could see the desperation etched on his face, mingled with something darker, something hungry. Just stay put, he insisted, his voice now low and menacing. The flickering lights overhead dimmed for a moment, and shadows lengthened, wrapping around us like tendrils grasping for a hold. I felt my breath hitch as I searched for a way out. The train was coming, but I had no idea how long I could keep this man at bay. I needed to escape, to find safety, yet the weight of his presence pressed down on me, trapping me in a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I could hear the brakes squealing as the train neared, and as the world around me shuddered back to life, I was left with one impossible choice. Stay where I was, or risk everything and run. The fluorescent lights flickered over the empty train station, casting an eerie glow on the cracked tiles beneath me. I sat hunched on the bench, my fingers nervously tapping against my phone, the screen showing an unsettling message, "Last train departed." My heart raced. I had never felt so isolated. The distant sound of a train rumbling into the underground tracks had felt like a promise, but the voice announcing its departure had shattered that illusion. All I could do now was wait. Time stretched like the shadows encroaching on the platform, a thick, oppressive silence enveloping me. The clock on the wall ticked down the minutes, each second echoing in the stillness. I glanced around, half hoping to see someone else, anyone else. But the station was desolate, the only company I had being the persistent hum of a vending machine that appeared to be out of order. I buried my head in my phone, scrolling through social media, but even the distractions felt hollow. The reality of my situation gnawed at me. I was alone, with no one to call for a ride when the last train was gone. I had taken this route so many times, comfortable in the routine, but this time felt different. A prickling sensation crawled up my spine, instinct whispering that I should be wary. When I finally looked up, I noticed a figure in the distance. A man, tall and disheveled, stood near the ticket booth, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his fraying jacket. I tried to ignore him, returning to my phone, but my heart sank as he began to approach, his gait uneven, as if he were unsure of himself. "Hey there," he called out, his voice echoing oddly in the empty space. "Looks like you're waiting for a train?" I felt a chill race through me. "Yes, I missed my last one," I replied cautiously, my eyes darting toward the exit. I longed for the safety of the street outside, but I knew I should stay put. It was dark out there, and the thought of wandering the streets alone was almost worse than being here. "Ah, that's rough," he said, inching closer. I could see his face now, pale and drawn, with unkempt hair that hung over his forehead. His eyes darted around as if he were scanning the shadows. "You should stay right here. It's not safe to be out there alone." "Right," I muttered, forcing a smile, hoping he would take the cue to leave. "I'll just wait for the next train." He leaned against the bench, a proximity that made my skin crawl. You never know who might be lurking around. Better to stay here, where it's somewhat safe. His grin was unnervingly wide, revealing teeth that looked too sharp, too jagged. "I can keep you company, if you want." I inhaled sharply, my pulse quickening. I wanted to flee, to bolt from this man who clearly didn't understand the concept of personal space. I turned my eyes away, pretending to focus on my phone, but the silence settled back in, thicker now, suffocating me. He stayed, his presence crawling under my skin like a bandage. I could feel his gaze linger on me, studying me as if trying to decipher a puzzle. "You know, I used to be a conductor," he said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I can tell you stories of the tunnels and the ghosts that haunt them." "Not really in the mood for ghost stories," I replied, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Thanks, though." He chuckled, a sound that sent chills racing down my spine. "You think it's all fun and games, don't you? Just wait until you hear the stories." He leaned in closer, his breath hot on my cheek. "They say some souls never leave the station, trapped between worlds." I turned my face away, my heart racing in an erratic ballet of fear. "I really should go," I said, desperately searching for an escape. "I think I see someone coming." "Stay," he ordered, the sudden intensity in his voice making me freeze. "You don't want to leave now. If you go out there, you might not come back." His finger jutted out, pointing toward the entrance. "Trust me. Just sit tight." The menace in his tone cut through the haze of shock. Panic surged within me. I had to leave. I had to get away from him and this empty station, but my body wouldn't cooperate. It was as if I were glued to the bench, caught in a web spun of fear and uncertainty. "Please, just go," I urged, voice trembling. "I want to be alone." His smile faltered for a moment, an almost imperceptible shift before he regained his composure. "You don't mean that," he said softly, stepping even closer, invading my space. "I'm just trying to help. I know this place. I can show you the way." "Where?" I barely whispered, dread pooling in my stomach. Wherever you want. His eyes glinted, a wildness lurking beneath the surface. I can take you to safety. You just have to trust me. In that moment, the world narrowed down to us, the shadows dancing around us, the station suffocating in its silence. I felt like a deer caught in headlights, frozen in fear, the fight or flight instinct raging within me. I wanted to scream, to run, but something deep down told me that fleeing might only make things worse. Just stay put, he repeated, and for the first time, I heard an undercurrent of desperation in his voice, as if his own well-being depended on my compliance. I was trapped, ensnared in a moment that stretched infinitely. The weight of his stare bore down on me, and I knew then that I had to find a way out before it was too late. The cold air wrapped around me like a damp blanket as I sat alone on the splintered bench, my breath visible in the dim yellow light of the train station. The last whistle had sounded hours ago, leaving me stranded in a place that felt increasingly alien and unwelcoming. I could hear nothing but the occasional creaking of the old building, a mournful sound that echoed through the stillness. Time had become meaningless, with the dull tick of the clock on the far wall the only reminder that the world continued to move outside this forsaken place. I had been pacing, but my steps soon became heavy, the fatigue settling into my bones. I was grateful for the momentary escape from the biting cold as I settled back down on the bench. The shadows seemed to shift and swell around me, and I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was being watched. Each soft sound, the rustling of leaves, the distant rattle of a loose sign, set my heart racing. That was when I first saw him, a figure emerging from the darkness at the far end of the platform. The flickering fluorescent lights cast an unflattering glow over his face, revealing a gaunt, angular structure framed by wild, dark hair. He approached with a slight shamble, as if the floor was foreign beneath his feet. My instinct screamed at me to leave, yet my feet were glued to the bench. "Hey there," he called out, his voice soft but oddly reverberant, as if he were speaking from somewhere deep within a cave. "You look like you could use some help." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to respond. "I'm okay, thank you. I'm just waiting for the next train." He chuckled, a sound that sent a chill racing down my spine. "Ah, you're not going to catch a train here tonight, you know that, right? They shut down the lines after midnight. You're going to be waiting a long time." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. My phone had died long ago. I was completely cut off. "I just need to figure out my options," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll be fine." "Fine," he echoed, his smile widening in a way that made my skin crawl. "But you're all alone. That's not safe. You shouldn't be out here by yourself." He stepped closer, the shadows swallowing him momentarily before he was illuminated again. "Why don't you just stay put? I can wait with you." I was aware of my heart now, thudding heavily in my chest, drowning out the ghostly sounds of the station. "Really, that's okay. I should call someone, or..." I hesitated, glancing around for any sign of help. The station felt like a tomb, silent and foreboding. He sat down on the edge of the bench, invading my space, his knee nearly touching mine. "You don't have to pretend. It's late, and you look scared. I get it." His voice had changed, lower, almost conspiratorial. "I can help you. Just let me help." A chill clawed its way up my spine as I scanned his features more closely. The manic glint in his eyes and the twitch of his fingers on the bench were telling. "You don't need to help me," I said, forcing as much calm as I could manage into my tone. "Why would you want to leave?" He leaned in, his breath hot and fetid. "If you stay here, I'll make sure you're safe." Every instinct screamed for me to get up, but my legs felt as heavy as lead. I wanted to move, to flee, but the way he looked at me made me feel like a deer caught in headlights. I need to go," I managed, my voice trembling. He chuckled again, this time with less humor and more malice. But where would you go? This place is dead. The world outside isn't what you think it is. He leaned closer, invading my space until I could smell the stale scent of cigarettes and sweat. You have no idea what's out there. I recoiled, shock propelling me to the edge of the bench. Stop it. Just leave me alone. His brow furrowed, and for a moment, the facade cracked, revealing something darker beneath. You think you're safe here? You're wrong. He gestured around as if the shadows themselves were threats. You think I'm the danger? You're mistaken. I'm the only one keeping you safe right now. What do you want? I whispered, my voice barely there as I fought back tears of fear. I wanted to cry out for help, but the station was still desolate, as if it had been forgotten by time itself. He leaned back, a smirk creeping onto his lips. Just to talk, really. I can help you. You can trust me if you stay. Something in his expression twisted inside me, igniting a primal urge to run. I could feel the suffocating weight of his gaze, and panic surged. I said no. I shot back, forcing myself to rise from the bench. Get away from me. He straightened, his demeanor shifting in an instant, the calm facade replaced with something sharp and wild. You don't want to see what happens if you run. The threat hung in the air, heavy and tangible. I took a step back, then another, my feet finally obeying the commands my brain had been screaming at them for what felt like an eternity. I turned, ready to flee into the shadows of the station, but the moment I turned my back, he lunged forward. Stay, he barked, his voice razor sharp. I didn't look back, adrenaline firing through my veins as I sprinted toward the glass doors, desperate to escape the nightmare that was unfolding. As I dashed into the night, I could feel his presence behind me, a predator pursuing its lost prey. The cold air met my skin like a slap, and I ran, knowing that the darkness held no comfort for me now. The overhead lights flickered again, casting an unsettling glow over the deserted train station. I had settled on a bench in the far corner, the cold metal biting through my thin jacket. My watch read 1:15 a.m., the second hand ticking loudly in the silence. The last train had rolled away into the night, leaving me stranded and unsure of what to do next. I had hoped someone might appear, perhaps a station attendant or a late-night traveler, but the hollow sound of my breathing was the only response. I clutched my phone, the dim screen illuminating my palm, but there were no missed calls, no notifications. Just silence. The kind that creeps in and laps its fingers around your throat. Just as I began to resign myself to the thought of calling a cab or, at the very least, finding a way to get my bearings, I noticed him. He emerged from the shadows, his silhouette distorting under the flickering lights as he approached. I could see his face better now, haggard and pale, with dark eyes that seemed to swallow the light around them. I straightened, instinctively pushing my back against the cold metal of the bench. "Hey there," he said, his voice unexpectedly soft, almost soothing. "You missed the last train?" I nodded, feeling the weight of his gaze. There was something unsettling about his presence. He was tall, broader than most men, with a long overcoat that hung awkwardly on his frame. "Need a ride?" he offered, his smile too wide, revealing a flash of teeth that felt predatory. "No thanks," I replied, attempting to keep my voice steady. "I'll wait for the next one." He stepped closer, the light reflecting off his coat, casting shadows across his face. "You could be here a while. The next train isn't until morning. It's a long wait." His eyes bore into mine, and I felt a shiver race down my spine. "I'll be fine," I insisted, the words coming out firmer than I felt. He tilted his head slightly, studying me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite piece together. I should have stood up and walked away, but my legs felt heavy, rooted to the bench. "Come on, I can give you a lift. It's dangerous to be out here alone. You never know who might come along," he said, the last part of his statement hanging in the air like a threat. "I really appreciate it, but I prefer to wait," I said, my heart pounding. He frowned, a flash of irritation crossing his features before settling into a look of concern. "You really shouldn't wait here. You don't understand. It's not safe." His words sent a jolt of fear through me. What did he mean? The station was empty, and I had no reason to think otherwise, but there was something in his tone that made the air feel thick and suffocating. "Please, just stay put," he said, his voice dropping lower, more urgent. "I want to help you." His insistence made me uneasy. I looked past him at the darkened platform, imagining the shadows stretching beyond into an abyss. I should have called for help, should have done anything but sit there while he loomed over me, but I couldn't move. My instinct screamed at me to flee, yet I felt paralyzed, trapped in this moment. "What's your name?" I forced out, attempting to break the tension, to humanize him. "Michael," he replied, his smile returning but not reaching his eyes. "And you? What's your name?" My voice faltered as I fought the urge to tell him anything. I settled for, "Just waiting for the train." His smile faded, and for a brief moment, there was a flicker of frustration in his eyes. "Do you really think that's a good idea? You don't know what could happen here at night." I took a deep breath, my instincts urging me to stand and run, but the bench felt like of ice. "I'll be fine," I repeated, though I knew my voice shook. Michael leaned in closer, his breath warm against the chill of the night. "You're not safe here, and you don't want to find out what happens to girls like you at this hour. Just let me help you. You'll feel better. It's just a short ride, and I promise it'll be quick." His words dripped with a thick, sickly sweetness, and my skin prickled as if coated in ice. An undeniable dread curled in the pit of my stomach, a warning bell ringing loudly in my mind. "No," I said firmly this time, pulling my legs under me and inching toward the edge of the bench. He straightened, his demeanor shifting from friendly to something more feral, almost predatory. "You really should reconsider," he said, his tone colder now, the kindness vanishing into the ether. My heart raced as I stood, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I took a step back, hoping to distance myself from his unsettling proximity. "I'm calling for help," I said, pulling my phone out again, though my hands trembled. "Help," he scoffed, the smile vanishing. "There's no one here to help you, and no one will come. It's just us. You really don't want to make this difficult." The weight of his words crashed around me, and I turned, ready to sprint toward the station doors when he reached out, grabbing my arm. His grip was like iron, and I gasped, wrestling against him as terror shot through me. "Stay," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. Panic surged, my blood roaring in my ears. I jerked free, adrenaline surging, and I ran toward the entrance. My breath came in harsh gasps as I sprinted down the platform, hearing his footsteps behind me, heavy and purposeful. I burst through the doors into the cool night air, heart thundering, the world outside sprawling before me. I had to get away. I had to find safety. But as I turned to glance behind me, only the shadows remained, lingering in the empty station, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. Story 6, Chase into Darkness. The night air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, a stark contrast to the fluorescent glow of the gas station I had just left behind. I had been on the road for hours, my stomach grumbling, a reminder of the cold, overcooked meal I had left untouched in a diner 2 towns back. My eyes burned from a lack of sleep, and fatigue clung to me like a heavy cloak. But home was just a few hours away, and I could almost feel the comfort of my bed drawing me in. As I drove, the landscape shifted from flickering streetlights to stretches of darkness. The road had narrowed, winding like a serpent through the trees, their silhouettes looming ominously against the moonlight. I glanced at the GPS, its monotonous voice echoing the instructions I barely registered. I should have paid more attention, but every moment spent driving was another tick of the clock, and I longed to be done. Then it happened. A flicker of light in the corner of my eye caught my attention as I missed a turn. The road veered suddenly, the signpost barely visible in the gloom. It was a small detour, the kind that felt inconsequential at the time, but the deeper I drove, the more isolated I felt. The trees pressed in closer, their branches clawing at the windows as if trying to draw me back. A chill crawled down my spine as I glanced into the rearview mirror. For a moment, I thought I saw headlights behind me, but the darkness quickly swallowed the vision. I shook my head, convincing myself it was nothing, a trick of the light or my imagination running wild. After all, who would be out here at this hour? I pressed on, the engine humming beneath me. Time trickled by, yet the road remained stubbornly empty. The oppressive silence was occasionally broken by the rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl, but otherwise, it felt like I had entered a void. I felt my heart start to race, and I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Moments later, that niggling feeling returned. Glancing back, I saw them, two faint beams of light pursuing me, steady and unwavering. Panic surged through me. My foot pressed down hard on the accelerator as I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence. But the lights grew nearer, emerging from the darkness like ghosts, and I could hear the deep rumble of an engine behind me. The road twisted like a snake, and I took the turn sharply, my tires squealing as I fought to keep my car steady. I was trapped in a nightmare, adrenaline coursing through my veins, the urge to flee overriding every rational thought. A part of me wanted to stop and confront whoever was chasing me, but the stronger part screamed for survival. As I maneuvered around a bend, my headlights caught a glimpse of the truck behind me. It was massive and dark, a shadowy beast gliding through the night, its headlights extinguished. The sight was chilling. No driver would travel this way without their lights on. My heart raced as I glanced left and right, seeking an escape, but the trees surrounded me like a prison. I found myself driving faster, the speedometer creeping up, but the truck remained close, gaining ground with every second. I could hear the rumble of its engine, an ominous growl that seemed to mock my futile attempt to get away. I knew I had to do something. The darkness was closing in, and the weight of dread pressed against my chest. I spotted an old dirt road on the right and, without thinking, I yanked the wheel and veered onto it. The car jolted over the uneven terrain, rocks and gravel crunching beneath the tires. I dared to glance back, and my blood turned to ice. The truck had followed me down this path. I barely registered the fear-stricken expression on my face reflected in the rearview mirror. My heart pounded as I plowed deeper into the darkness, branches scraping against the car like skeletal fingers. I could barely see, the light from my headlights barely penetrating the gloom. I kept driving, praying for some sign of civilization, but nothing appeared except the oppressive silence and the relentless growl of the engine behind me. The truck's headlights flickered on, illuminating the road behind me, and my stomach dropped. It was a massive, hulking figure, its grill twisted into a menacing grin that seemed to taunt me. I pressed the accelerator even harder, the car lunging forward with a surge of desperation. The trees blurred past as I fought to stay in control, my breath quickening every time I glanced back to see how close it had come. The dirt road began to slope downward, and I felt the tension in the steering wheel as I navigated the descent. Fear clawed at my throat. Every second felt stretched, every heartbeat echoing the impending doom. If I could just find a way out, a path back to safety. But the trees seemed to close in around me, suffocating and oppressive, as if they were conspiring to ensnare me. Suddenly, the The truck's lights blinded me, cutting through the darkness like a knife. I squinted, fighting to see beyond that piercing glare, and in that moment of lost vision, I felt the unmistakable thud of adrenaline crash over me. I couldn't let it catch me. I wouldn't let it. I took a sharp turn, steering wildly as I tried to keep the momentum in my favor. The road seemed to end in a swirl of panic, but I pressed on, praying for a miracle. As I plunged ahead, my heart raced, a rhythm of terror that echoed with every beat. I had taken a wrong turn, but I was determined to find my way back. Little did I know, the true horror was only beginning. The night air felt like a heavy blanket, wrapping my car in an oppressive silence as I wove through a web of unfamiliar roads. I had promised myself I wouldn't take that detour. My GPS, stubborn relic, had insisted on the shortcut, its monotonous voice guiding me deeper into the void. I had dismissed the creeping sense of dread that crawled up my spine, convincing myself that the shortcut was just a minor inconvenience, a brief thrill in the monotony of my drive back home. The trees loomed like sentinels, their branches gnarled and knotted, twisting into grotesque shapes against the faint light of the moon. I had turned off the music, hoping the silence would quell the rising anxiety in my chest. But instead, I found myself hyper-focusing on the sounds around me, the soft hum of my tires against the asphalt, the rustle of leaves in the wind, and something else. An insistent thrum that reverberated in the stillness. It was the faint sound of an engine, distant yet unmistakably close. I cast a glance in the rearview mirror. The road stretched behind me, empty and uninviting. The only sign of life was a pair of distant headlights flickering into view. I felt a shiver of discomfort as I recognized the truck. It had appeared not long after I'd made that fateful turn. At first, it had remained a blurry shape, lost in the shadows, but now it was uncomfortably close. I flicked the rearview mirror back into place and pressed the accelerator, the engine responding with a fervent growl. The trees blurred into a dark smear of green on either side, their trunks flickering past like ghosts of the forest. I didn't want to look again, but I couldn't help myself. Another glance, and my heart dropped. The truck had turned off its headlights, swallowed by the darkness, but still there, following me. Panic seized me, and I felt beads of sweat form in my temples. My mind raced with thoughts I couldn't contain. Was this a coincidence, or was I being hunted? I fumbled with my phone, but the signal crapped out before I could even pull up a map. Glancing at the speedometer, I pushed my foot down harder, the needle creeping past 60. The ghostly shadow of the truck remained, its engines rumble a low growl against the night. Twists and turns began to blur my sense of direction. An unpaved road emerged, a narrow path that veered off to the right. My instinct screamed at me to keep going straight, but my gut told me I needed to escape. I took the turn, gravel crunching beneath my tires. The truck followed, its dark form still looming behind me. The oppressive darkness closed in, swallowing the moonlight completely. I could barely see the road ahead, the headlights of the truck long gone. I tried to control my breathing, but each inhale felt like a gulp of icy water. The thrum of my heart echoed in my ears as I navigated through the labyrinth of trees surrounding me. With each minute that passed, the truck grew bolder, its rumbling engine closing the gap. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wanted me to panic, to make a mistake. I fought the urge to look back. I needed to keep my focus on the road, but I could sense it, lurking just beyond the edge of my vision. A flash of movement caught my eye, something darted across the road ahead. I slammed on the brakes, the tires skidding on the gravel, and I barely managed to regain control as I veered to the side. My heart raced as I squinted into the darkness, straining to see what had crossed my path. All I could make out were shadows, but the feeling of being watched intensified. The truck's headlights flickered back on, blinding me with an intensity that made me squint against the sudden light. I cursed under my breath, my stomach nodding, and I pressed on the gas, the engine roaring defiantly. I had to find a way out of this nightmare. The road twisted again, each bend feeling more treacherous than the last, and the truck remained behind me, relentless in its pursuit. I gripped the wheel tighter, the rubber digging into my palms, feeling the adrenaline surge through my veins. The engine's growl chased away the silence, but the sense that I was being hunted only grew stronger. A glimmer of hope emerged ahead, a distant light. I squinted, recognizing it as a house or perhaps a gas station. Desperation propelled me forward, and I willed my car to move faster. The headlights of the truck flickered again, and I knew it was closing in. Come on, I muttered, gripping the steering wheel as if it were a lifeline. As I approached the light, I felt a surge of hope mixed with dread. A small, unkempt house loomed ahead, the light spilling from a solitary bulb hanging from the porch. I had to make it there. I could call for help, find someone awake at this hour to give me a sense of safety. But as I neared the driveway, the truck's engine roared behind me, a reminder that I wasn't alone. I made the turn, tires screeching on the gravel, and darted up the short path leading to the house. The moment I halted, I flung the door open and stumbled out, heart racing, ready to run towards the light. Then I froze. The truck came to an abrupt stop just behind my car, its engine idling ominously. I stood paralyzed as the door to the truck creaked open. A tall figure emerged, silhouetted against the glare of the headlights. I could barely see their face, but my instinct screamed at me to move. I dashed towards the porch, ready to scream for help before I even thought about it. The figure stepped closer, the shadow morphing into something more menacing as the light caught their features. All I could think was that I had taken the wrong turn, and in doing so, I had found something far worse than I had ever imagined. The night had settled around me like a heavy blanket, thick and suffocating. I could barely see a few feet in front of my car, the dim glow of my headlights barely piercing through the swirling fog that had rolled in, thick as a sinister presence. With every turn of the wheel, I felt the weight of my decision to take this shortcut, a decision fueled by impatience and a touch of recklessness. The winding road, lined with dense trees that stole the last light of the moon, seemed to whisper warnings I was too frazzled to heed. As I pressed on, the unease in my chest coiled tighter. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was past midnight. My stomach twisted as the realization hit me. I should have been home by now. This stretch of road was desolate, devoid of life or comfort. The occasional rustle in the bushes resonated like a growl, and I told myself it was just animals, rabbits, or maybe a deer. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else lurked just beyond the veil of shadows. Then it happened. A shadow slid into my rearview mirror, overcoming the reflection of the fog. A truck, big and looming, followed me. Its headlights were off, leaving only darkness in its wake, but I could sense its presence like an ominous cloud. My breath caught in my throat, and I gripped the steering wheel harder, knuckles whitening. I pushed the accelerator down, the engine roaring in protest as I sped up. The truck responded, its dark form accelerating too, closing the distance between us. Panic clawed at my insides. I glanced again at the rearview mirror. It loomed larger now, a predator stalking its prey, silent and insidious. I could almost feel its eyes boring into my back, cold and unyielding. The road twisted and turned like a snake, and I took each curve with desperation. I couldn't remember exactly where I had gone wrong. My mind raced, replaying the last half hour of my drive, the moment I had turned off the main road into this claustrophobic tunnel of trees. I was lost, and the knowledge sent a jolt of fear coursing through my veins. The truck, relentless, was still behind me, its dark silhouette blending into the blackness of the night. With no other choice, I glanced at the side roads that branched off from the main path, their entrances dark and uninviting. I spotted one, shallow and overgrown, but with a glimpse of gravel. Without a second thought, I turned sharply, tires screeching in protest. The truck followed suit, not missing a beat. My heart pounded like a war drum as I navigated this new path, a whirlwind of dread coursing through me. The gravel crunched beneath my tires, and I could barely see 2 feet ahead. I switched on my brights, but the trees were thick, their branches stretching like skeletal fingers, clawing at the remaining serenity of the night. A sudden thought struck me. What if I drove into a dead end? Would that truck catch up to me, box me in, or worse? I veered left, then right, praying for escape. The truck's engine rumbled like an angry beast, and I dared to glance in the mirror again. It was closer now, impossibly so. My heart raced as I felt the rush of air from the truck swooping around me. I could see the dark outline of the grille, foreboding and massive. A surge of adrenaline propelled me forward, pushing my foot down harder on the pedal. But the further I drove, the heavier the atmosphere became, almost as if the trees were leaning in, closing ranks around me. That gnawing thought of being trapped began to take root. There was no logic to this pursuit. Why hadn't it turned on its headlights? What did the driver want? The road ahead split again. In one direction, it seemed to continue winding further into the woods. The other appeared to lead to an open field, still cloaked by nighttime shadows. I chose the field, heart in my throat as I turned sharply one more time. The gravel crunched beneath me, giving way to the soft earth, the car swaying dangerously as I drove toward what I hoped would be safety. But I was wrong. The truck followed, unyielding, relentless. It didn't seem to care about the terrain. I could hear its rumble, echoing louder as if it were savoring the chase. I floored it, but the acceleration felt sluggish in comparison to the dread that filled every crevice of my mind. The truck drew nearer still, its shadowy form cutting through the night like a sinister omen. I reached the edge of the field, and before me lay a sprawling mass of grass that would lead into a copse of trees. I hesitated, the thrill of open space battling the primal instinct to run. The truck was close now. I could see the darkened windshield, but no driver, no expression, just a shrouded figure in the deep, haunting void of the cab. Desperation clouded my judgment as I veered into the trees, branches whipping against the car like angry hands. The branches tore at the paint, and I winced with each collision. The tread settled in my bones, weighing me down with every turn I took. I couldn't think straight. All I could hear was the roar of the engine behind me, the unmistakable sound of relentless pursuit. I pressed deeper into the darkness, praying for some sort of clearing, some form of respite. But the trees closed in around me, sealing my fate, and I could no longer hear my own thoughts over the cacophony of fear. I was being hunted, and the only question left swirling in my mind was whether I could escape. I sat in the driver's seat, heart pounding like a war drum, the oppressive silence of the night wrapping around me like a leaden shroud. The glow of my dashboard lights cast eerie shadows across the interior of my car, illuminating only snippets of the world outside. Trees loomed like sentinels on either side of the narrow road, their branches intertwined, forming a dense canopy that swallowed the moonlight. I had taken a wrong turn, and now I was miles away from where I needed to be. My phone was dead. I had relied on the navigation app too heavily, not bothering to print a map for this trip. I cursed under my breath, the frustration of the evening bubbling to the surface. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the tail lights of the car I had passed earlier. Instead, I was met with nothing but darkness. Just the way I liked it, I thought bitterly, wishing for the safety of the familiar roads I had traveled countless times before. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed something in the distance, a set of headlights illuminating the road behind me. Anxiety twisted in my gut, and I pressed the gas pedal a little harder, trying to put distance between myself and whatever lay behind me. The headlights flickered ominously, but my own were bright against the pitch-black void that surrounded me. As I sped up, I stole another glance in the mirror. The truck was still there, its headlights now off, leaving nothing but a silhouette that seemed to grow larger with each passing second. I could feel my breath quickening, and a cold sweat prickled the back of my neck. I was being followed. I didn't know how or why, but the sensation twisted like a knife in my gut. My mind raced, 1,000 scenarios flashing through my head. Maybe they were just another lost driver, another soul wandering these forsaken roads. But then again, maybe it was something far worse. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles whitening, and forced myself to focus on the road ahead. I needed to find a way out. The road twisted and turned, each bend revealing only more darkness. I could barely see where I was going, the trees closing in like a living wall. The truck behind me remained relentless, a predator stalking its prey, the absence of headlights making the whole situation more surreal. I felt the weight of dread settle in my stomach, heavy and cold. A sudden thought pierced through my panic. I had to find a place to hide. I scanned the landscape, hoping for a glimmer of civilization, a gas station, a diner, anything that might offer a shred of safety. The truck was gaining on me now. I could see its hulking form loom closer in the rearview mirror, a shadow stretching itself across the asphalt like some monstrous specter. Then, to my left, I caught sight of a dirt road branching off from the main one. Without thinking, I veered left, sending gravel spraying as I turned. The car jolted as I hit the uneven surface, and my heart raced as I pressed on. I could hear the rumble of the truck behind me, its engine a low growl in the stillness of the night. The dirt road was narrow and overgrown, lined with thick underbrush that reached out like gnarled fingers, threatening to scratch the sides of my car. I could barely see where it led, the darkness swallowing everything but the narrow beam of my headlights. I drove faster, the tires bouncing over potholes and roots. Each bounce sent jolts of fear through me. Would I just be leading the truck to more desolation? I could no longer hear the truck, but that did little to quell my anxiety. What if it was simply waiting for me to stop? I gritted my teeth and pressed on, scanning the sides of the road for any sign of life, anything that might signal I was going in the right direction. Suddenly, the road dipped sharply, and I felt my stomach drop as my car teetered on the edge of control. I wrestled with the steering wheel, praying I wouldn't roll into the darkness. As I careened down the slope, I spotted a clearing up ahead, a faint light flickering in the distance. I aimed for it, desperate for sanctuary. The clearing opened up into a small field, and I braked hard, tires screeching against the gravel. The light revealed itself to be a dilapidated cabin, its windows dark but the porch light flickering like a dying star. I was about to jump from my car, but something in the rearview mirror caught my eye, a flicker of headlights. The truck had found me. Panic surged through me, and I threw the car into reverse, spinning it around to face the road. I had to leave, had to get away, but the truck was barreling toward me, a monstrous silhouette against the night sky. Heart racing, I glanced around for any hint of escape, but the darkness felt suffocating. As I shifted into drive and slammed on the accelerator, the truck's headlights burst to life, illuminating the field with blinding intensity. I sped off toward the dirt road, desperate to lose them, but my heart sank as I realized the road was too narrow. I couldn't go back, I had to find another way. Just as I made the turn, the truck's engine roared to life, vibrating the air with a bone-chilling growl. My pulse quickened, and I pushed my foot down harder, urging my car to go faster, to put as much distance as possible between myself and that relentless beast. The cabin's lights faded behind me as I tore back into the suffocating darkness. The truck's headlights clung to my rear like a shadowy demon, a relentless specter I could not shake. I felt a primal fear clawing inside me, urging me to survive, to escape. I pressed on through the darkness, praying for a miracle, for a way out of this nightmare that had only just begun. The night had deepened, swallowing the last remnants of twilight as I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles pale against the faded leather. My heart thudded erratically in my chest, matching the rhythm of the tires bumping over the uneven asphalt. I was a stranger in these woods, lost amongst the towering pines that loomed like silent sentinels. The map on my phone had long lost service, leaving me adrift in a sea of shadows and uncertainty. I wrestled with the urge to turn back, to retrace my steps to the highway, but the darkness behind me felt more menacing than the unknown ahead. I had taken the wrong turn in a moment of distraction, an innocent mistake that brought me to this godforsaken place. The headlights of my small sedan were weak against the oppressive blackness, illuminating only a few feet in front of me. Each flicker of light revealed twisted branches that reached out like gnarled fingers, and the sense of being watched prickled at the back of my neck. As I drove deeper into the woods, the sound of my tires rolling over gravel was punctuated by an unsettling silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves. My mind raced with thoughts of what could lie ahead, but it was the growing sensation of something behind me that began to gnaw at my sanity. I glanced into the rearview mirror, and my breath caught in my throat. A truck, large and menacing, shadowed my path, its headlights extinguished. I couldn't make out the make or color, but the shape loomed like a predator stalking its prey. Panic surged through me, and I pressed down harder on the accelerator. My heart thumped violently, drowning out the engine's roar as the road twisted and turned, a serpentine pathway leading me deeper into darkness. I cursed under my breath, the fear clawing at me as I stole another glance over my shoulder. The truck remained there, a dark specter, inching closer with every desperate turn I took. In my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of the driver, or at least I thought I did. Just a shadow, faceless and still, but it sent a jolt of terror through me. I didn't have time to dwell on it. I needed to think. I veered sharply left onto a narrower road, one that I hoped would lead me away from my follower. The trees closed in around me, their branches scraping against the sides of my car like skeletal fingers. The truck did not waver, it followed, relentless. I could feel the weight of its presence bearing down on me, suffocating. I had long lost the luxury of rational thought, now it was just survival. The speedometer climbed, the needle edging into the red as I tore through the suffocating darkness. Was I losing my grip on reality? The shadows danced along the roadside, twisting and warping into grotesque shapes. The headlights of my car strained against the black moth night, and I felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with sheer terror. This was no longer just a wrong turn. This was a chase. Every turn became a desperate plea to escape, but the truck's engine growled like a beast itching to sink its teeth into me. I could hear it now, the low rumble echoing in the stillness, cutting through the night air. I forced myself to focus, pushing aside the panic that threatened to spiral out of control. Maybe there was a way out, a fork in the road that led to safety. The path I took twisted and turned, and my headlights danced over the uneven ground. I spotted a sign that read Cedar Grove, the name a mocking reminder of the safety I had once felt on the open road. I didn't know Cedar Grove, but the name felt like a beacon in the relentless void. I pressed on, my breath hitching as I felt the truck gain ground. The branches overhead arched like a tunnel, blocking out any light from the moon. I pushed the gas pedal even harder, feeling the engine protest under the strain. My mind raced, ticking off possible options: find a place to hide, call for help, or keep driving until dawn broke. But all I could hear was the truck's engine, a deep growl that became a menacing reminder of my precarious situation. Suddenly, the road ahead forked sharply. To the left, a narrow path wound deeper into the woods, while the right promised an escape into an open field, perhaps a way to signal for help. My heart pounded as I made the split-second decision. I veered right, praying the truck would hesitate, would lose me in the expanse of the fields beyond. But as I glanced back, I felt my stomach drop. The truck was right behind me, relentless. It roared forward, its headlights flashing on, cutting through the darkness like a knife. I couldn't breathe. I slammed my foot down on the gas, my mind racing as I entered the open space. The moonlight spilled over the field, illuminating the tall grass swaying in the night breeze. I had a moment of clarity, a moment to think. Up ahead, a dilapidated farmhouse emerged from the shadows. Its windows were dark, but the silhouette stood defiantly against the night. I aimed for it, praying it would offer refuge from the monster in pursuit. As I approached, I could barely breathe, my heart in my throat. The truck behind me picked up speed, engine roaring aggressively. I skidded to a stop in front of the house, adrenaline flooding my veins. I didn't know if anyone was inside. I didn't care. I scrambled out of my car, my heart racing, and sprinted towards the rickety porch, knocking on the door like a frantic animal. The sound of tires screeching against gravel echoed in my ears. I turned to see the dark truck come to a halt, the engine idling with a sinister growl. Would this farmhouse be my sanctuary or my tomb? I turned back to the door, pounding it with my fists, desperate for any sign of life. Just as despair threatened to consume me, the door creaked open slightly, revealing a sliver of darkness beyond. I didn't hesitate. I pushed through the gap, crossing the threshold into the unknown. The door slammed shut behind me, and I leaned against it, gasping for breath, praying that whatever followed me would not breach this sanctuary of shadows.